Okay, awesome. Where we left off last week was basically right here. If you remember, we were talking about designing your customer experience. We took some examples. हम बात कर रहे थे कि आप like this was the end result of everything that we did last week, which is really trying to figure out and visualize your entire customer experience so that we can sort of identify places where we can innovate. So I had given you this example for Uber. Of course, I also spoke about a hospital emergency room as another kind of example, and we took it from there. And of course, on Friday, I had individual conversations with each of you guys about where you guys are with your startups and how we are taking it from there, right? Now, welcome back. It's week 3. Saket, you can start recording, sorry. Now, again, as usual, it's a conversation, not a webinar. Please don't treat it as such. Feel free to ask questions. We are at week 3. We have one more week to go. So ask as much questions as you can. Like ask really difficult questions. ऐसा question कि मुझे भी सोचना पड़ जाए कि इसका आंसर क्या है. ठीक है? Ask as difficult. Like make my life as horrible as you possibly can by asking the most difficult questions, right? Because when I get a chance, I'll do the same. So why don't you take your revenge and ask me like really difficult questions that I have to answer? Okay. You know me, I'm not going to waste time with this. Now we are at week 3. So basically we started with the product market fit. We got to see what a customer journey is, how we think of our business, what are the different steps. And finally we are on week 3, which is finance, right? So this entire week is going to focus heavily on like your financial strategy. How are you going to make money? What are certain revenue models out there? Give you examples. And of course, as usual, I'm going to start today with very general examples of things to look out for. And then on Friday, I will tailor make it subjectively to how this applies to you all, right? Now, again, please don't forget this. I always keep coming back to this at the beginning of every week because, as you know, culture is everything, right? Your discipline as founders, the way you lead yourselves, the kind of decisions you make in your life, the way you treat people, especially people who have nothing to do with your business. Like, for example, I've met a lot of people in life who have, let's say, um, who have ruined friendships and have not been able to treat their loved ones well, and have had breakups and stuff like that because they're pursuing their dreams, is what people tell me. But from my experience, what I understand is if you can't if you are making your startup as an excuse to mistreat people around you, then you're not going to be very successful anyway, right? Because you don't know how to treat people. So remember, it's not an excuse. Culture is very important. Like that is everything. Like what you do with others, you're going to do in your own company. And I think I was having a conversation with Mansi's team, where I was talking about the fact that when you are a team of 2 or 3 people, the way you behave with each other is going to be the way people behave with each other when you're a team of 200, right? So if you are a confused team, if you're a team that does not have clear conversations, when you have a team of, let's say, 50 people, 50 people are going to be confused and there will be no clarity in what you're doing, right? So culture is set when you are one person, 2 people, 3 people, and then it scales and grows to the rest of your company. Very important. Please remember that. As usual, I want to go back to the culture of this boot camp. And are we good with this? Is there something new we want to add? Are we good with this? Everyone? Sab theek? Working out well? Did you guys get a chance to collaborate, learn from each other, even like outside of the sessions? I know Akash is teamed up with somebody here, but Baki log, did you get a chance to learn from each other? Yeah? By the way, सबके Google Drive folders shared है, so do take the initiative of also looking at what others are working on, some problems that they may be facing, because something that you are facing with someone else may have already solved. So for example, Akash, I think, got help from Kshitija or someone else when it came to, like, he was looking for a hotel to talk to, and someone else offered help. So that always happens. So make sure you collaborate, make sure you get a chance to look at what each other is working on, what you're doing. If you want beta users to test a feature, test it in this cohort. Na? Don't wait for anyone else. They don't know, yahan pe hi log hai. Give it to them. They're going to test it out for you. That's how you get good validation and feedback. So again, this is the culture that we're following. Please make sure you try new things and maybe fail at it. In fact, that is awesome because this is a safe space. यहाँ पे आप fail करोगे, feedback मिलेगा आपसे. Me, Ramana, other people are here to help you. So when you try new things and fail, that is perfect because it means you're going out of your comfort zone and testing new things out. Very important, all right? So please make sure you do that. It's my job to push you out of your comfort zones, on purpose and even forcefully sometimes. But that's because innovation lies outside your comfort zone, right? Now, let's get started with week 3. Now, before I begin, if you remember, last week I had asked this question, याद है? मैंने ये सवाल पूछा था सबको, right? Under what condition does your product or service fail? Now, did you guys get a chance to think about this, by the way? किसी को पता है कि आपका product या service कब fail होगा? Like, what is the condition जिसमें even if everything works perfectly about your product, everything, like users even get your product, they have the money to buy it, they purchase it, they're using it, but in spite of that, even after using it, either the outcome is zero, which means the problem पहले जैसा था वैसा ही है, it didn't get solved, so your product is actually not solving any purpose or not solving its intended purpose, या फिर the outcome is negative, which means that sometimes it makes the problem worse than what it was. And I gave you guys the example of the cobra effect, if you remember, right? uh, Now, did anybody get a chance to think about this? You can let me know in the chat. You can switch on your mic and tell me. If you did not yet think about it, that is also okay. I'm going to take this up in more details. But did anyone get a chance to think about this? Do you know the answer to this for your startups or even a first version? Even if you think कि शायद ये होएगा, you can let me know. Anyone? Okay, fair enough. That's all right. Now, before I start talking about financial models, it's very important for me to talk about something else, and we'll get to that, which is you need to first understand the conditions under which your product or service might fail and sort of mitigate that or be aware of it before you start learning how to grow and scale your company. And because if you don't fix your product for 5 users when 5 million people use it, you might be in for a potential lawsuit. Okay, so you got to fix things for 5 people first before you scale it up. A lot of these things happen on the run. We don't put in so much thought into it, but especially if you're working, like let's say in the healthcare domain, or if you're working in, let's say, the aviation domain, there's a lot of industries where the risk, like the cost of failure is extremely high, right? So you got to make sure that certain things are taken care of in advance. Now, I'm going to show you a framework that you can use जहाँ पे even before you launch your first version of the product, इससे पहले कि आप कुछ भी पैसे भी डालो, there is a certain thinking model जो आप use कर सकते हैं जिससे आपको पता चल जाएगा कि what may be the potential causes of failure or risk and what might be the possible bottlenecks in this whole product, especially from a product design perspective. So there's one hardware startup here among like all of us, and that is very useful in that cases as well. It helps you save time, it helps you save money, and it helps you also identify potential major problems that might come up as a result. And you get to do that even before you get to let's say launch anything in the market. Swarnali, if the net is not working in the shop, definitely that could be a failure mode. Now, you're going to learn, Swarnali, that that's not exactly a failure mode. It's something else called a constant. But let's get into this. Now, what is a failure mode? Basically, FMEA एक systems thinking से लिया है, ठीक है? This concept is actually used in systems thinking, so it's borrowed from there, and it's used heavily in like healthcare industry. So it's a systemic way of identifying all the possible scenarios in which your solution might fail. ठीक है? एक मॉडल है ये, इसको बोलते हैं failure mode effect analysis, FMEA. Now, FMEA, it's very useful, like I said, in places like healthcare and like aviation, because it helps you create sustainable systems and strategies that can withstand things going wrong. And this is extremely useful when suddenly the whole environment under which your product or service operates changes. Like, for example, what if you suddenly have a pandemic someday? You can foresee some of the things that will go wrong and exactly where it will go wrong, so that you can dedicate resources and time to fix those things when it happens, right? So it's very useful as a concept. Now, everything that we do here today is slightly conceptual, so you're going to have to like be more engaged and involved with this than usual. So if you get stuck with anything or you don't understand, stop me and I'll re-explain it. Okay, now let's take an example. ये सब definition तो होता रहता है, ठीक है? सब Google भी कर सकते हैं, but let's actually take an example to make this work. Now, I'm going to take a very difficult example, and then it's going to help you understand the concept, and then you can apply it to your projects. It'll become much easier. So let's take an example. ये जो picture देख रहा है आपको बाजू में, let's assume that this is a mobile clinic. Again, I am picking a project like this because our team has actually worked on public healthcare projects in my company, we've worked on public healthcare projects in areas with very low connectivity or low resources. So this is something that I can relate with. Hence, I'm picking this up, right? So not just a random example. Now, let's say that this is a mobile clinic. So क्या है? ये mobile clinic is a van, ठीक है? तो let's assume that this van operates in a district jahan pe, or a certain region jahan pe there are villages. These villages don't have like clinics or healthcare infrastructure, a lot of doctors. So what happens is this van visits these villages or areas of residence, and van ke andar there is a healthcare worker, right? So there's a healthcare worker who's been trained with a computer and an internet connection and a stock of medicines, right? So इसके अंदर एक हेल्थ केयर वर्कर बैठा हुआ है जिसको ट्रेनिंग मिला हुआ है, उसके पास एक कंप्यूटर है, इंटरनेट है, एंड देयर आर सम मेडिसिन. सो व्हाट हैपेंस इज पेशेंट्स कम टू दिस वैन, राइट? जब ये वैन होता है ये विलेज में, लोग आते हैं वैन के पास एंड हेल्थ केयर वर्कर, एचडब्ल्यू मतलब हेल्थ केयर वर्कर को अपना सिम्टम्स बताते हैं कि मेरे को बुखार है, ठीक है, मेरे को 2 दिन से बुखार है, नौशिया है, आई हैव अ हेडेक, and all the other symptoms that they can. So what happens is the healthcare worker checks the patient's vitals, मतलब टेम्परेचर चेक कर लेता है, ठीक है, पल्स चेक कर लेता है, जो वाइटल इन्फॉर्मेशन चेक करना है वो सब कर लेता है, जो भी पॉसिबल है, राइट? ब्लड प्रेशर, थिंग्स लाइक दैट, एंड देन फीड्स द डेटा इनटू द कंप्यूटर. सो वाइटल्स का इन्फॉर्मेशन लेके अलॉन्ग विद द सिम्टम्स वो कंप्यूटर में डाल देता है. अभी क्या करता है, the computer checks the symptoms against an online database and shows a prognosis. So prognosis और diagnosis में difference क्या होता है? That a prognosis is actually based on is based on a possible identification of an ailment without doing any tests. वो prognosis होता है. मतलब जब डॉक्टर बोलता है कि आपका सिम्टम्स देख के लग रहा है कि आपको टाइफॉइड है, लेकिन एक ब्लड टेस्ट कराते हैं फिर डायग्नोस कर पाएंगे कि टाइफॉइड एक्चुअली है कि नहीं, मलेरिया भी हो सकता है, राइट? सो टेस्ट के पहले जो बोला जाता है उसको प्रोग्नोसिस बोलते हैं, ठीक है? सो computer check करता है symptoms against an online database and it shows a prognosis. And then what happens is the healthcare worker gives some medicines on the basis of that. जैसे डॉक्टर बोलता है कि आप ब्लड टेस्ट करा लो, रिपोर्ट आने में 1 दिन टाइम लगेगा, तब तक आप ये दवाई चालू कर दो, टेक सम एंटीबायोटिक्स, ताकि आपका कंडीशन और खराब ना हो जाए, थोड़ा स्टेबल रहे until we can figure out कि एग्जैक्ट ट्रीटमेंट क्या करना है, राइट? सो हेल्थ केयर वर्कर थोड़ा दवाई दे देता है उसके हिसाब से, बिकॉज द सिस्टम शोज कि इट लुक्स लाइक दिस पर्सन हैज अ 80% चांस कि इसको मान लो मलेरिया हुआ है, ठीक है, 60% प्रोबेबिलिटी टाइफॉइड हुआ है, या मे बी 30% प्रोबेबिलिटी समथिंग एल्स. सो अकॉर्डिंग टू द हाईएस्ट प्रोबेबिलिटी इट गिव्स सम रेस्क्यू मेडिकेशन, राइट? सो दैट द कंडीशन डजंट गेट वर्स. दैट्स कॉल्ड रेस्क्यू मेडिकेशन. एंड ऑल्सो स्केड्यूल्स अ डॉक्टर्स अपॉइंटमेंट. सो बेसिकली हेल्थ केयर वर्कर बोलता है कि आप ये दवाई लो, 2 दिन में आप एक डॉक्टर आपको विजिट करेगा, तब तक आप ये दवाई लो, एंड डॉक्टर जब आएगा तो वो आपको आगे बताएगा कि आपको क्या करना है, हॉस्पिटल में एडमिट होना है, नहीं होना है, वगैरह वगैरह. गॉट इट? सो द प्रोसेस इज, एक पेशेंट आता है, सिम्टम्स बोलता है, हेल्थ केयर वर्कर सुनता है सिम्टम्स क्या है, डालता है कंप्यूटर में, थोड़ा वाइटल्स चेक कर लेता है, टेम्परेचर, ब्लड प्रेशर, स्टफ लाइक दैट, एड्स इट टू द डेटा. कंप्यूटर ऑनलाइन एक डेटाबेस के अगेंस्ट में चेक करता है कि ये वाइटल्स और ये सिम्टम्स के हिसाब से क्या पॉसिबिलिटी हो सकता है, एक प्रोग्नोसिस देता है कि 70% चांस है कि इसको टाइफॉइड हुआ है. उसके हिसाब से हेल्थ केयर वर्कर दवाई भी दे देता है, बिकॉज उसको बोलता है कौन सा दवाई है, उसके पास दवाई का स्टॉक है, वो दवाई दे देता है पेशेंट को. एंड ऑल्सो स्केड्यूल्स एन अपॉइंटमेंट इन द सिस्टम कि डॉक्टर आएगा आपके पास 4 दिन में, तब तक आप ये दवाई खाओ, ठीक है, रोज दिन में 3 बार, आफ्टर मील्स, वगैरह वगैरह सब समझा देता है. दैट्स हाउ दिस वर्क्स, राइट? एंड देन द पेशेंट टेक्स द मेडिसिन एंड गोज बैक. गॉट इट एवरीबॉडी? हाउ दिस वर्क्स? या एग्जांपल समझ में आया सबको? नाउ here is a question for you. If I were to ask you कि ये पूरा solution में what are the conditions under which the solution fails, इसका क्या मतलब है कि पेशेंट आया, वैन तक पहुंच गया, सिम्टम्स भी बताया उसने, ठीक है, द हेल्थ केयर वर्कर सब कुछ चल रहा है, कंप्यूटर का इंटरनेट भी चल रहा है, ठीक है, प्रोग्नोसिस भी आया, दवाई भी दिया उसने, दवाई लेके गया, लेकिन जब डॉक्टर वापस आया 4 दिन बाद पेशेंट का कंडीशन चेक करने में, ही फाइंड्स दैट द पेशेंट्स कंडीशन हैज बिकम वर्स, या फिर इन एक्सट्रीम केसेस मींस कि something went wrong even though everything worked in the solution, लेकिन फिर भी outcome is either zero or negative, which means something else went wrong which is not exactly a part of your solution but affects your solution really really critically. Can you guys, what could be a condition or a scenario जहां पे ये सब कुछ हुआ लेकिन फिर भी the patient's condition has become much worse if not absolutely fatal? Can you guys think of scenarios?
दवाई नहीं ली.
दवाई नहीं ली, ठीक है, ये हो सकता है. Kshitija, wrong diagnosis, if you think about it, that's internal, which means it's not exactly a condition, because अगर diagnosis गलत हो रहा है, इसका मतलब है that you need to make your algorithm better. But let's assume that the diagnosis is absolutely correct according to the symptoms that were given. दवाई भी देता है, लेकिन उसके बावजूद the condition is or zero. So maybe Kshitija, you can think about under what conditions can the diagnosis be negative if your system is 100% working fine. So दवाई नहीं लिए आकाश, ये हो सकता है कि what if the patient does not follow the prescription, what if the patient actually does not take the medicines that were given, क्योंकि आप घर जाके खिला तो नहीं आ सकते हो ना दवाई, आपका तो वो solution है नहीं. Once the patient takes it home, it's up to the patient to actually follow up and take those medicines. You can't do anything about that. So that could be one. Patient entered the wrong details. Mansi, do you mean that the patient said the wrong symptoms? Is that what you mean? Because the healthcare worker actually enters the details.
Yeah, the healthcare worker entered the wrong symptoms.
Achha, so the healthcare worker entered the wrong details. Again, that's a human error, which means that something is wrong in your system in the first place because the healthcare worker was not trained properly. So that's not a failure mode. That's actually an internal constraint stopping from the solution working, right? But think about the fact that healthcare worker ने सही डाला data, लेकिन फिर भी there is something wrong with the end result. Didn't change drinking water if disease is waterborne. Again, Swarnali, possibly it could be that there is an other factor affecting the health of the patient, which is outside the scope of whatever is taken care of. But in most cases, they're usually told to like sort of check their water, vagara, vagara. But yeah, fair enough, Swarnali. There could be an external factor. Improper meals,
Sir,
Himanshu, definitely. What if they don't actually follow a strict, like a meal routine and they take medicines but they don't take proper meals, and that could make it worse. You can't offer good meals, right? That's not your job, but that affects the outcome. You're right. Camellia, were you saying something?
यस सर, ये हो सकता है कि वो लोग आधा डिटेल्स बोले, पेशेंट आधा डिटेल्स बोले जो वर्कर्स को, और पूरा डिटेल्स नहीं बोले, तो आधा डायग्नोसिस हुआ है और आधा डायग्नोसिस नहीं हुआ है.
That is awesome, Camellia. Actually, you know what? When we were on the field in some of the African communities we worked in, this really happened. Like people didn't tell us the whole story. Can you think of a condition under which this can happen, Camellia? Like under what condition might a patient hide some of the symptoms or not say some of the symptoms?
सर, वो लोग को डर लगता है कि अगर वो लोग मतलब ज्यादा कुछ बोल देगा तो मतलब जैसे नेगेटिव, मतलब जैसे विलेजेस में होता है कि वो लोग को हॉस्पिटल जाने का डर रहता है बहुत ज्यादा.
Right,
वो लोग
right,
को मतलब इसीलिए वो लोग पूरा नहीं बोलते कि क्या वो लोग का मेन
right,
प्रॉब्लम क्या है.
right,
तो उसकी
right.
वजह से ये चीज होता है, प्रॉब्लम होता है.
Right. So, of course, you're right. There is a fear of like medical infrastructure and being hospitalized and things like that that a lot of people have. And sometimes because of that, they don't say all the symptoms because they're scared that they might have to be hospitalized. Maybe it'll, have more bills to pay and stuff like that. This is very common. Another reason is, Kshitija, you're right. Another reason is stigma, right? So, for example, there might be a disease which is really considered to be a stigma if you get it. For example, AIDS is considered to be a stigma in a lot of places, including in India. Like if you have AIDS, like it's a major stigma. So if you think you have the symptoms, maybe you'll not see it because बाजू वाले patient को सुनाई दे देगा कि तुमने क्या symptoms बोला, and then they'll go and spread it to the rest of the community who will then not interact with you anymore. So that is associated as well, a stigma, right, of certain diseases. In fact, when the COVID pandemic started in India in the very early days, because there was a stigma associated with the disease, a lot of people who had COVID actually didn't say that they have the symptoms until it got really worse, right? So it has happened with the COVID pandemic as well. That happens. A very, very common reason that you may have thought of already is that sometimes when the patients coming to the van are female, and let's say there is a male healthcare worker inside the van, in a lot of cases and in most cases, the female patient may not be comfortable to share everything about their symptoms with this male healthcare worker, right? Especially if the symptoms have got to do with some kind of an ailment in the reproductive system. It's very difficult for them to open up. Maybe they'll not even go to the van in the first place, right? That which is more likely, right? So those could be one. Anything else you can think of? Anything else that affects the outcome of this whole solution, but is just beyond the scope of your project? You can't do anything about it. Saket, bolo.
Rohan, it is prognosis, not a diagnosis. So the treatment which they were given is actually means it's not a proper approach. They didn't know
Yeah,
that it was actually a problem or not.
right,
So it
right.
may be the
So again, a prognosis is not treatment. A prognosis के बाद rescue medication दिया जाए. Treatment नहीं चालू होता. Treatment सिर्फ diagnosis के बाद हो सकता है. Like only a doctor can treat you, not like someone like this. Someone like this can only give you medicines that helps you stay stable and not get worse by the time a doctor visits you in 4 days, right? तब तक के लिए दवाई लो ताकि आपका कंडीशन खराब ना हो जाए. You know, like you can be okay till the time a doctor comes and visits you. Like that's not a treatment. That's rescue medication. But you're thinking in the right direction, Saket. So I'll give you that. Another thing that happens is sometimes if people don't follow the prescription, अगर बोला गया था कि 3 दवाई after 3 meals खाओ and उसको सारा दवाई एक ही बार में ले लिया, उसको लगा जल्दी ठीक हो जाएगा. You can't do anything about that, right? You can't actually stick to that. So basically, these are some of the things that we are talking about. For example, the patient does not prescribed dosage at home, or maybe the patient is unable to communicate the symptoms to the healthcare worker, stuff like that. So these are some examples, along with everything else that you mentioned. These are examples of failure modes. Do you understand why they are failure modes? Because they are outside the scope of your project, but they affect the outcome of your project, right? Like you can't do anything much about these things, but they affect your outcome. You know, it's just beyond the scope, but it still affects you. Very important for you to know failure modes is because you need to be aware that these things may be happening in that system that you may not be able to do anything about. But think about the implications. If you actually give medicines and someone doesn't stick to the prescribed medicines and then there is a negative outcome to that, you will be blamed for it as someone who's running the solution, right? Because it looks like it happened because of you, but you need to understand that sometimes there are conditions, you know, beyond the scope of what you're doing. It's very important for you to know this, because these are limitations of your product or service, but it has huge implications for what you're designing because you're dealing with human beings. Got it? Makes sense? Yeah. Now, we know what failure modes are, but I want to talk about another aspect of understanding the limitations of your product, which is something called system constraints, right? So failure modes lie outside the scope of your project, but system constraints are things that you can control. It's within the scope of your project, and they affect the outcome of the entire system. So basically, they have implications on the result of your solution, but they are within your control. You can do something about it, right? It's within the scope of your project. So basically what we're talking about is these are, you know, this can be like a physical component, it may be a condition, it can be a human process, or it can even be like some kind of a policy that you have, right? Something got to do with your project that is affecting the outcome of your entire solution, right? Now, if we go back to our example, which is this right here, and I ask you the question, what are this mobile clinic's limiting constant? Which means if I ask you the question, what are the factors that lie within the scope of this solution and affect the efficiency of the whole solution? मतलब अगर वो particular factor में कुछ गड़बड़ हुआ तो overall efficiency reduce हो जाएगा. You know, it's very important to ensure that these parts are moving fine and are working ठीक से in order to ensure that the overall efficiency is 100%. What would those factors be according to you? Internet, definitely. So availability of internet is a factor, because if internet is not available, you know, it's not going to work. It's going to reduce the efficiency because the system depends on the internet for its prognosis and to let them know what happens. So algorithm, you're right, Shibani and Himanshu. If the efficiency of the algorithm is low, in that case, you know, the end result efficiency will also be low. The training of the healthcare worker, definitely, if the healthcare worker is not trained enough, it is going to affect the overall outcome of the whole solution. Web of healthcare worker itself, yeah, of course. So you mean the training of the healthcare worker. By the way, the health of the healthcare worker is also a factor. For example, if this is operating in extremely hot conditions and if you do not install an air conditioning inside that van, the healthcare worker will not be operating at 100% efficiency himself because he'll be tired, he'll be exhausted, it'll be really hot, and that's going to affect maybe his patients when he's listening to so many patients coming in, and then that's going to affect the overall outcome as well, right? Saket, the medicines, the inventory, of course, like you need to ensure that you're well stocked with medicines at all time, because if the medicine is not available, then it affects the outcome of the solution because then the efficiency reduces, right? So definitely. Anyone else? Anything else you can think of? The language as a barrier is another factor, yes, because if someone speaks in a language that the healthcare worker is not trained or is not fluent in, is not going to be able to understand the symptoms, and that's going to lead to major issues, right? Which is why in projects like this, by the way, the healthcare worker is always from the community that a project like this serves. Like, you don't hire like, someone else from some other community of some other country to come and operate in a place like this, because they'll not be able to handle it. It has to be someone who understands the culture, understands the language, is a local, where other locals can trust him or her, etc. Anything else you can think of, guys? Anything else? All right. So here's a list of possible constraints, right? Internet connectivity, medicine inventory, the healthcare worker training and preparedness, the health of the healthcare worker, fuel of the van is a constant. You run out of fuel, you can't go anywhere. The efficiency of the symptom prognosis algorithm, right? Which is something that you guys mentioned. So do you understand how these are different from failure modes, right? These are within your control. If they don't work properly, the overall efficiency of the entire solution reduces. Hi, baat samajh? Now here is the magic, right? What is the point of learning all this rubbish if you don't know how it helps you? Now I'm going to show you how, when you know these things, when you know what your constraints are, even before you make the first version of your mobile clinic, you can actually ensure that it is ready to operate in conditions where some of these issues might occur, and yet the solution is delivered 100% fine. So I'll show you how to do that. Here's a process, okay? Now, it might look like a very complicated stuff, but just hear me out and I'll show you how simple this is really. So it's a 5-step process. Step number 1 is you identify and choose a constraint, right? Second step is you got to decide how you can exploit the constraint. So by exploiting a constraint in systems thinking language, it means how can you ensure that even if वो particular factor available ना हो या फिर वो particular factor का efficiency कम हो, in spite of that, how can you ensure that the system works? Which means, how will you change your design to ensure if that particular constraint or factor is not available, or if it's working at low efficiency, you can still, keep the overall efficiency of your solution constant, right? How can you redesign your system? अब ये सोचते हो. Now, when you redesign your system, you can come to step 3, which means you will have to make changes in all the other parts of your system in order to accommodate for that redesign, right? The other constraints will also be affected as a result of that. And once you do that, step 4 is that wo constraint elevate ho jata hai, which means it's not that big a dependency anymore. Like, even if it's not working, chalega, because you just redesign and you have a backup, and then you repeat, you go to the next constraint. So when you keep doing this for all your factors, ultimately you'll end up with a very well designed system. Let me give you an example. I know this looks a little complicated. Here's an example to actually make it simple for you. Let's say कि हम internet connectivity को as a factor choose करते हैं, right? Internet connectivity is a constant. अगर वो unavailable है, या फिर the internet bandwidth is low, या फिर if the signal is weak, it's going to affect the overall algorithm working, because it fetches data from the cloud and then runs the algorithm there, and then it shows what steps need to be taken. Now, if I ask you this question, how can you redesign the system ताकि even if internet is unavailable, or if the internet is very weak, the solution still works at 100% efficiency, which means the waiting time is not much. फिर भी ये system काम करे, internet ना भी रहा तो आप क्या change करोगे? Any ideas? What change will you make in this solution ताकि even if internet is not working या फिर internet का efficiency is low, फिर भी आपका solution works well, there is no issues? Can you think of an answer?
लोकलाइज टीपी रख लेंगे सर एक.
Local copy रख लोगे आप data का?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. You can keep a local copy of the data server in the van, Himanshu, but servers always connect to the internet, in some way. So unless, the better thing to do is just have it as local storage, right? So that could be one, definitely. Anyone else you can think of something? So storing data offline, basically, ताकि it doesn't have to refer to data from the cloud. It can just check it on the hard drive itself and offer a prognosis. Anything else you can think of? Swarnali, what is PWA? What do you mean?
That's a progressive web application. That is like
I got it. So a progressive web application, for those of you who don't know, is something that does not have a backend and uses like very simple stuff like HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So when you open it on your browser, you actually get a symbol on the side that allows you to download that app offline for usage, right? So certain apps, even though it's not actually an app, it could be just a simple website. If it follows the rules of PWA, which is a progressive web app, you can download it offline to your phone or your computer to use it later on. I'll maybe show you all an example of a PWA if you're interested at the end of this session. It could be one, Swarnali, but in that case, you will have to figure out how to store all the data without a database so that it can work offline, right? Anyone else? Can you think of something? So storing it offline, maybe having the entire application run offline like a PWA. Anything else? Think of थोड़ा non-technical examples भी सोच लो, मतलब non-technical भी हो सकता है इसका आंसर.
You can have a person with a good knowledge of all this type of disease.
Okay. So basically, you're depending on human memory. Another way to do this is by actually having a book with all the symptoms and probable combinations that you can refer to offline. You used to have these medical journals back in the day. Like my dad still has one where he can look and he can see the symptoms and he can like ये दवाई लेना चाहिए शायद ऐसा होता अभी भी मिलता है, right? Or maybe you can actually have a doctor on demand that you can call. So like telemedicine. You can call a doctor and say कि अरे डॉक्टर मेरा इंटरनेट नहीं चल रहा है, एक पेशेंट है, उसका ये सिम्टम्स है, मैंने उसका चेक किया, ब्लड प्रेशर इतना है, टेम्परेचर इतना है, आप बता सकते हो क्या दवाई देना चाहिए, and the doctor can tell you on the phone based on his experience and his knowledge, right? So telemedicine is also a possible solution to that. So do you understand how these are certain changes or certain ways in which you can sort of have in your solution ताकि इंटरनेट नहीं भी काम करे तो ये सारे चीजें से हो जाएगा. Got it? Now let's take an example, okay? If we say that hard drive, right? If we say that in order to solve the internet connectivity constraint, I am going to redesign this solution ताकि I have an extra external hard drive where I store the data ताकि even if there's no internet, hard drive से आ जाए. Can you think of an immediate next constant जो आ जाएगा आपके पास? Like another factor नया आपने create कर दिया जिस पे अभी depend करता है. Do you know what that is? It's very simple, hard drive space, right? If you run out of hard drive space, then you can't store anything. Then again, you'll have to look for something else, either buy a new hard drive or go back to the internet. Now, let me ask you this question. Let's say that you redesigned your solution. आपने एक hard drive लाया, ठीक है? Internet अभी नहीं भी है, तो hard drive में सारा data है. आप data वहां से लोगे and you can offer a solution. Now, let me ask you this question. A new constraint that you have now is hard drive space. How can you redesign your system without adding any new component? जहाँ पे even if you have limited storage space in your hard drive, आप फिर भी वो space को maximum अच्छे से use कर सकते हो ताकि you don't have to depend on internet, you don't have to buy a new hard drive, you don't have to buy anything else, and आप फिर भी you can operate and your whole solution can work and there's no problems at all. Can you think of a way to do that? Limited storage space is your new factor, it's your new constant, and you don't have any more money और पैसे नहीं है आपके पास कुछ खरीदने का, and internet पे तो depend नहीं कर सकते. What can you do now to make this work? Maintaining a register like an offline register, sure. Anyone else? Can you think of something? How can you ensure that even though you have limited storage space, you can still ensure that it's used 100% efficiently ताकि आपका solution काम करे, or you have some kind of a backup? Can you think of an answer? Think about the overall bigger picture. Don't get too technical. Step back, look at the van, look at what is happening. Think of the entire user journey and सोचो आप कुछ कर सकते हो क्या जिसके वजह से अगर इंटरनेट ना भी रहे एंड हार्ड ड्राइव में लिमिटेड स्पेस हो, फिर भी ये वैन काम कर सकता है अपना ताकि अपना सोल्यूशन 100% डिलीवर हो. Look at the bigger picture. Step back. Messaging to user mobile, sure, but you need to store the data for the diseases to first get a prognosis like and medicines and a prescription based on what is happening ना, तो वो डिजीज का डेटा स्टोर करना पड़ेगा कहीं पे. अब हार्ड ड्राइव में लिमिटेड स्टोरेज है, हम सारे इंफॉर्मेशन नहीं सेव कर सकते. लेट्स अज्यूम आप कैसे फिर भी ये काम करवाओगे? द आंसर लाइज इन what this van is doing, the bigger picture. Any guesses? Did you understand the question? Did anybody not understand the question? सबको question सवाल समझ में आया? Okay. Any guesses?
सर जस्ट अ वाइल्ड गेस, मे बी इससे डॉक्टर के पास चल जाओ वैन लेके।
मतलब तुम मतलब अबैंडन कर दो पेशेंट को, मतलब देखो भाई मेरा इंटरनेट नहीं चल रहा है, हार्ड ड्राइव में स्पेस नहीं है, आप जाओ डॉक्टर के पास। विल यू डू दैट?
नो नो, एक्चुअली इसी वैन में बैठ के अगर
मतलब आप डॉक्टर को लेके
सर
घूमो वैन में। ओके, दैट्स वेरी वाइल्ड, यू आर राइट आकाश। डॉक्टर के पास इतना टाइम नहीं होता कि वैन पे बैठ के घूमे सारा दिन, बिकॉज यूजुअली क्या होता है ना ऐसे केसेस में, देयर इज वन डॉक्टर हैज टू विजिट लाइक 10 विलेजेस एंड ही हैज टू मेक अ डिसीजन बेस्ड ऑन सबसे क्रिटिकल केसेस कहाँ पे है, वहां पे ये सारी चीजें काम आती है। बट फेयर इनफ, दैट्स अ गुड अटेम्प्ट आकाश। सो मैं आंसर दे रहा तुमको, ठीक है?
सर
द आंसर इज एक्चुअली प्रीटी, या सॉरी, वाज समवन सेइंग समथिंग?
ये सर मतलब वो जनरेटर है, तो अगर इंटरनेट नहीं चला तो वो राउटर से भी, मतलब राउटर से भी जनरेटर से कनेक्ट करके तो हो सकता है ना?
मतलब नो, दैट्स नॉट हाउ इट
मतलब
वर्क्स। व्हाट इफ देयर इज नो सिग्नल? आपका इंटरनेट कनेक्शन ही मतलब कनेक्टिविटी नहीं है, तो क्या फर्क पड़ता है कि जनरेटर है या नहीं? Do you understand that, Camellia? It's
यस
like if you have no signal on your phone and you can still charge your phone, how will you connect to the internet?
यस
Yeah. So I'll tell you what the answer is, ठीक है? इंटरनेट पे नहीं डिपेंड कर सकते, हार्ड ड्राइव में लिमिटेड स्पेस है। अब कैसे विद इन दोज कॉन्स्टेंट्स हाउ विल यू मेक इट वर्क 100% एफिशिएंटली? हियर इज हाउ। लेट्स टेक अ स्टेप बैक एंड लेट्स थिंक अबाउट ये वैन करता क्या है। दिस वैन विजिट्स सर्टेन विलेजेस जहाँ पे हेल्थ केयर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर नहीं है, पेशेंट्स आते हैं, सिम्टम्स बोलते हैं, हेल्थ केयर वर्कर सुनता है, डालता है, प्रोग्नोसिस आता है, दवाई देता है, प्रिस्क्रिप्शन देता है, डॉक्टर कब आएगा बोल देता है उसको विजिट करने। दैट्स हाउ दिस वर्क्स, बराबर? नाउ थिंक अबाउट दिस, if it's a van, it can't go all over the world, right? A van can only travel a limited area. Like for example, maybe this van can only operate in a certain area in one district in Maharashtra, not even in other states, correct? Like it can only operate maybe within 100 kilometer radius inside a certain district in Maharashtra, not more than that. उससे ज़्यादा नहीं हो सकता, it's impossible, correct? What that means is, let's say that this van operates in Maharashtra. Is there any need for you to store data of diseases like Ebola or yellow fever on this van? Is there any need? जरूरत है क्या store करने का? No, right? Because those diseases are not, there's a very, very low probability like a disease like that will show up in the region in which this van operates. So what you do is, you make a list, you make a priority list, right? You make a list of the most prevalent diseases in the region, like कौन से diseases सबसे ज़्यादा frequency में पाया जाता है उस region में। आप let's say you take the top 100, top 200 diseases, you store that information on your hard drive, बाकी सारे चीजें आप क्लाउड सर्वर पे रख दो क्योंकि वो सारी चीजें दिखने का प्रोबेबिलिटी बहुत लो है, and then you can still operate this because the most prevalent, like सबसे highest frequency diseases आप hard drive में store करोगे, that allows you, there's a highest possible chance ये है कि जो भी आता है, जो भी डिजीज होगा आपको हार्ड ड्राइव में मिल जाएगा, एंड जो लो प्रोबेबिलिटी वाले डिजीज है आप वो आप क्लाउड सर्वर पे डाल दो। सो बेसिकली व्हाट यू आर डूइंग इज you are prioritizing your data to make decisions of what do you store on the hard drive and what do you store on the cloud. Same data, अब data को लो, restructure करो, reprioritize करो, and therefore you can end up having a system that works really well without the need for you to invest money or change anything drastically. Got it? So basically what we're talking about is right here, prioritize the symptoms of the most prevalent diseases in the region in which that van operates. हाई प्रायोरिटी डेटा को आप ऑफलाइन हार्ड ड्राइव में रखो, लो प्रायोरिटी डेटा को आप क्लाउड सर्वर पे स्टोर कर दो। गॉट इट? मेक सेंस? हियर इज हाउ दिस इज सो पावरफुल। एज अ स्टार्टअप एंटरप्रेन्योर, मान लो कि आपके पास, फॉर एग्जांपल लेट्स अज्यूम दैट आपके पास एग्जैक्टली 1000 रुपए। अब 1000 रुपए से आइदर यू कैन स्पेंड इट ऑन अ हार्ड ड्राइव और यू कैन स्पेंड इट ऑन अनदर इंटरनेट राउटर। आप दोनों नहीं कर सकते, आपको कोई एक ही करना है, ठीक है? इफ यू हैड टू मेक अ चॉइस, you already know based on all of this that you should actually spend your money on the hard drive because the internet connectivity is a possible constraint, and by investing in a hard drive you can prioritize your data and you can restructure the data and store high priority data offline and everything else online. आई बात समझ how this works? Any questions? Got it? So basically this right here is what we are talking about, right? For your startup, under what conditions does your product or service fail, right? You need to be aware of them. You need to be careful, and maybe you also think of possible ways to address them. For example, if in the previous example, one of the possible scenarios of failure is that people do not trust medicines and don't stick to their prescription, maybe as a side service, you can run awareness programs teaching people the importance of how to have good health, how to ensure you have clean drinking water, have proper meals, stuff like that, but it's an extra service. But you need to be aware of that. And the other question is, what are your system's limiting constraints? Because you need to optimize them, make it better. So here's what we're going to do. I want you guys to take 5 minutes, okay? I'm going to switch off my video. I'm going to be right here. Take 5 minutes. Think of the answers to these two questions and we'll take it from there. Got it? Take a screenshot of this. Take 5 minutes. I might stop sharing my screen as well. I'll switch off my video, but I'm right here. You have a question, switch on your mic and just ask me. Take 5 minutes. Think of what could be the answers to these two questions for your startup and we'll take it from there. To the first question, you know the drill. Um, Open this up on your phones and type in your answers and let's see what we have. Okay?
सर एक चीज पूछनी थी
हाँ बोलो.
लाइक अगर मैसेज क्लियर नहीं जा रहा है, मान लो कोई न्यू प्रोडक्ट है, उसका कॉल टू एक्शन मैसेज क्लियर नहीं जा रहा है, तो वो कैन बी कंसीडर एज अ फेलियर?
That's considered as a constraint. तुमको ये सवाल देखो, जब भी ये डाउट आए ना कि कोई चीज तुमने सोचा and you don't know whether it's a failure mode or a constraint, हमेशा ये पूछना कि does it lie within the scope of your project? मतलब क्या तुम्हारा जिम्मेदारी है कि नोटिफिकेशन सबको जाए? द आंसर इज यस, देन इट्स अ कांस्टेंट. लेकिन अगर तुम बोलो कि हम तो भेज देंगे नोटिफिकेशन, लेकिन अगर यूजर का फोन में नेटवर्क ही नहीं रहा और उसको नोटिफिकेशन मिला नहीं एंड उसको जरूरत है उस वक्त, इन दैट केस users network coverage becomes a failure mode. Like what if the user is outside network coverage? समझा आकाश?
तो बेसिकली जो अपने कंट्रोल के अंदर है वो फेलियर में कंसीडर नहीं होगा?
नहीं, जो अपने कंट्रोल के अंदर है वो कॉन्स्टेंट्स में आएगा, जो अपने कंट्रोल में नहीं है वो फेलियर मोड में आएगा, राइट? बिकॉज यू कांट डू एनीथिंग, लेकिन फिर भी आपको अफेक्ट करता है. सो सबसे पहले हम पहला वाला सवाल का आंसर देखते हैं. इफ यू नो व्हाट द आंसर टू दिस क्वेश्चन इज, यू नो व्हाट टू डू. Go to the URL, that's the code, type in your answers and we'll see what we have. Don't take more than a minute to do this because we need to move forward as well. Type in your answers. If you have any questions, I'm here, you can ask me. सही और गलत का टेंशन मत लो, अगर आपको लगता है कि ये आंसर है, टाइप इट, आई विल गिव यू माय फीडबैक सो इट विल हेल्प आंसर योर क्वेश्चंस. Okay. Quality content, interactive sessions, right testing, ठीक है. Keep them coming. Okay, I see some answers. Keep them coming, guys. By the way, अगर आपका 3 conditions नहीं है, because I know that it asks you to enter 3 responses, you can even type in 1 or 2 or whatever it is that you know. 3 लिखना जरूरी नहीं है, but generally minimum 3 तो होता ही है सबका. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. I see 4 responses. Does anybody else want to just type in? Okay, 5 responses. Mansi, I think MHP is mental health professional, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Anybody else? We have 5 responses. Are we waiting for someone? If no, I'm going to continue. Okay. Now, by the way, if you still have things to add, please make sure you add to this. I will have the responses with me and I will also perhaps send it to you guys if you want to have a look at it later. So let me address a few of these. Okay? So सबसे पहला बात, conditions under which your solution fails, matlab they are outside your scope, but they affect your overall solution outcome, right? Now, let's take a few of these cases. So let's start with negative UX. किसका था ये negative UX?
It was mine.
Wait, who?
Mine.
Kshitija. Kshitija, what do you mean by negative UX?
Not a good user experience, you know, like.
Okay. Okay. So let me ask you this question. So you mean basically your user experience is not great, and because of that, like maybe people don't book a session with your therapist, or maybe they don't use your app, they uninstall the app, whatever. Okay. So सबसे पहला सवाल मेरे को पूछने दो. UX किसका responsibility? Is it something you can control, or do you think it's beyond your control?
It's something we can control.
Right? If it is something that you can control, in that case, it's not a failure mode. It is a constraint. So it becomes the answer to your second question, because a UX is something you can control. It is your job to make sure that the UX is the best possible. It's your job to do user research and to do UX research in order to create the most optimized user experience. In that case, if your solution is failing as a result of negative UX, it's not a failure mode, it's a constraint, which means that it's within your scope, you need to fix it. Got it? Shailaja, makes sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. In that context, the mental health professional cannot handle the case. So this is very tricky, by the way. But let me ask you, whoever typed that, Mansi or Shiteja, why do you think an MHP would not be able to handle the case? And is that something you can control?
I think it was
Some cases get out of the hand, and even the mental health professional can't like handle them.
Yeah.
And in that case, it will be a bad image for both the professional as well as Ragi.
Okay, got it. Now, it's very interesting that you mentioned that, Mansi and Kshitija, because it falls under a gray area. Because think about this. Of course, like you can address it in a way to ensure that you constantly take feedback from your users, and in case a certain mental health professional is not working out for them, you can recommend like let's say a full refund and a session with another mental health professional for free, right? You can do that. Like for example, you say that it's a money like this works for you. If it does not work for you, we'll refund your money and get you another mental health professional that is better suited for you based on your feedback. If it works with this new person, you continue your therapy with this new person, and then next sessions of course will be charged, but on the house one session for free for you, just to make it work. Or maybe you have a blanket rule of the first session being free for everybody, just so you absorb that cost knowing that you're going to have a lot of people using your app and you can make up for it. So I'll talk about all of this in the pricing, but on one end you can do something about it, but then if something goes really wrong inside the session, because again it's confidential information, neither the therapist nor the nor the person being treated can reveal or should reveal to you about what really happened inside the session. Because if something goes wrong and you don't know what that is, there's nothing you can do about it. So this can be a failure mode. You're right. Got it? How this works, Mansi, Kshitija, and everybody else? Aa raha hai samajh mein? Make sense? Yeah. So again, other things, for example, I see a lot of stuff here which could be a failure mode. So let me ask this: can't scan QR? I think it was you, Akash. What do you mean by that?
हाँ, तो सर जैसे कि हम लोगों ने उनको क्यूआर तो प्रोवाइड कर दिए, पर होटल स्टाफ ने सही जगह क्यूआर नहीं रखे हैं। उनके
Right,
पास
right.
हाँ हाँ, और
Okay.
गेस्ट को समझ नहीं आ रहा कि कैसे स्कैन करे क्यूआर कोड को, ऐप, वो चीज।
Got it, got it. So अगर ऐसा कुछ होता है, मान लो कि होटल ने अपना QR कोड लगाया नहीं है, because sometimes you have to put it out on display, or maybe it's torn, or maybe it's not being able to scan, maybe actually user का फोन खराब है जिसके वजह से स्कैन नहीं हो रहा है. There's nothing you can do in that case, right? So it is a failure mode. You're correct, Akash. But again, it's important for you to ask कि ये कब हो सकता है, and make your design as simple as possible. Make sense? Yeah. So you know that could possibly be a failure mode. So again, just letting you know all of these things. Offline ordering, again, was that yours, Akash? Offline ordering?
यस सर।
है ना? So that is also failure mode. सही है कि अगर तुमने solution दिया, सब कुछ है, they can scan the QR code and they can place their order, सब कुछ है, लेकिन फिर भी फोन उठा के order करता है reception में, because users are used to behaving like that. They are not used to QR codes. What if they do that? In that case, they bypassed your entire solution and they ended up using the phone in any case. In that case, it's a failure mode. Why? Because the outcome is zero. जैसा पहले हो रहा था वैसा ही हो रहा है, कुछ change नहीं हुआ. Got it? Makes sense, everybody? Yeah. So based on that information, so failure modes in this case, ये बहुत specific question है. It's not like when things fail in general in the real world. In अपना context, system thinking का context में, failure modes are those conditions जहाँ पे सब कुछ सही है आपका solution के अंदर, लेकिन फिर भी आपका fail हो जाता है because there's an external factor or a user behavior perhaps you can do nothing about that affects it. Along those lines, why don't you guys try and answer this in that case? Take a minute. What are your systems or solutions limiting constraints? Which means, what are the factors that you need to be careful about and that you need to ensure is working 100% well, जिसके basis पे पूरा solution काम करेगा? What do you think that is? What are your solutions limiting constraints? So for example, internet connectivity could definitely be one. All of you, I think, need internet connectivity for this to work. But what else? Think of very specific things. So for example, for Mansi and Kshitija, one of them, don't write this because I'm telling it, is availability of, let's say, therapists, right? If therapists are not available, you can't do anything about it. By available, I mean their calendar availability. You can write it. I'm joking. There are two of you. Just write as much as you can. So what are your solutions limiting constraints? By the way, there's a typo. It's limiting constraints and not limit constraints, but you know what I mean. Sorry. Okay. What else? I see one response. What else? What else? Responses. What else? All right, we have 4 now, 5. This is good stuff, by the way. Thanks so much for putting all of this in. All right. Anybody else? Are we waiting for anyone else to fill in? Just take 15 seconds more and then I'll start commenting on these. All right. Now, most of the things that you have here are constraints, right? So, for example, updated menus, and someone updating the menu, payment issues. So, payment, of course, if a payment doesn't work properly, someone is not comfortable paying, the money doesn't come in, too much back and forth. That could be internet connectivity. By the way, stigma. I'm pretty sure that this was by Mansi and Shitija. Stigma is not a constraint. It's actually a condition under which it can fail, because you can't eliminate stigma from society. Nobody can do that, actually. Like, that's beyond the scope. If somebody really has stigma and does not open up or decides to not use your service in the first place, there's not much you can do there, right? So it's not something you can control. It's on the user's end, right? Call to action message, hotel staff knowledge. User doesn't need help. ये किसने लिखा? User doesn't need help. ये किसका था?
It was mine.
Who? I'm sorry.
No, मतलब
Acha, Kshitija. So, yeah, I couldn't see who's talking. It was like a voice in my head, like I'm possessed or something. हाँ बोलो Kshitija. Kshitija, are you talking? Because I can't hear you. Can anybody else hear her? किसी और को सुनाई दे रहा?
No.
Okay. Kshitija, we can't hear you in case you're talking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. So sorry for that.
No problem. बोलो.
So I was saying कि sometimes what could happen, like I've seen this happening. Like sometimes the user, like they might be feeling low, or they might be they might like they need help, but they do not recognize it. Even if they recognize it, don't want to get help. They're like, it's okay. We like we just go away, or we just don't want to. Sometimes it might be because of their condition. They might not feel like getting up, taking the phone, or talking to the counselor, or that.
Okay.
This
Okay.
is what I meant.
Okay. So let me ask you this, Kshitija and Mansi. Do you feel like that is something you can control? Do you think it's in your control if someone doesn't want help? Do you think you can do something about it?
I don't think so. That
Yeah. So if you can't do something about it, it is a condition under which your solution may fail, because your job is to help people when they seek help. If someone does not want to seek help, there's absolutely nothing you can do, right? In that case, even if you have a user who exists on your app right now but does not want to seek help, the person's condition may not necessarily improve. It is most probably going to remain the same, if not get worse. So your solution is not going to be able to do anything, because if a person doesn't need help, what are you going to do, right? So in that case, Shidija, that is going to end up being a condition under which it fails, which means it's a failure mode. Got it? Make sense?
Yeah. Also, I had another question.
Sure.
What if somebody is taking session?
Yeah.
Now, might be that the counselor, assigns them some homework, or they ask them to do some sessions or something, but the user doesn't do it.
Yeah.
So
it's a failure mode. You can't do anything about that. It's just like the previous example, jahan pe there was a mobile clinic, and if prescription like medicines were given to a patient, agar wo ghar jaake dawai leta nahi hai, to what are you going to do about it? It's beyond your scope, right? There's nothing you can do about that, but it does affect the overall implication of what your solution does. So you can't do something there, but it's always important to try and see and make everybody involved in this project aware that these things happen. So you can counsel your patients, you can check up, you can have feedbacks, you can do as much possible, but ultimately there's nothing you can do about it if they don't follow up on whatever the therapist has asked them to do. In that case, it's important for you to figure out, why didn't they follow up? Is it because they didn't have the time? Is it because it was something else? Is it because they didn't like the behavior of your staff? We don't know, right? So you got to figure out why, but also understand that they are failure modes. Got it? Make sense? Yeah. Limited tech guys किसका था?
मेरा
Sahil. No, wait. Who's this?
No.
I can't see. Oh, Ramana. Sorry.
So I felt that for me, the business may, one of the constraint that I talked about was solution getting outdated. And
Right.
the limiting factor, I felt that while my solution, when it was in the peak, I didn't have the right tech guys. So
Right.
I was losing business because of that. So that was a limiting factor for me.
Absolutely. Makes sense. And this is very common, like for a lot of startups, like you can't scale and grow if you don't have the right talent. In your case, it was tech. And this also applies to everybody else here. Sometimes when you scale and grow, you need to hire talent of the right kind. And if there's dependency, if you don't get that talent, you can't scale, right? Unless you have the skills yourself. So definitely one of them. Also, I am assuming that quality content was something that Himanshu has put in. It makes sense considering that you are an education company moving slightly towards self-learning courses. So content is everything in that case, like is one of the most important things, if not everything. Right, Himanshu? I think it was you, correct? All right. Do you guys understand? Makes sense? Any questions? I'm going to stop sharing this and go back to my slide. Any questions? Anything at all? Is this clear? You understand how
I had one question.
Yes.
So it might be something related to failure only, but I just want to get it clear if that's it or not.
Bolo.
What if somebody needs help, but they don't have enough, money to seek help,
Yeah.
So what could they do in that?
So dekho. Well, that's
What could we do? Yeah.
that's a pretty awesome question, by the way, Shirija. So in fact, I had spoken about this like based on my experience as well, and it's something that everybody asks, like because mental health sessions are usually very expensive, right? For an hour, like the good therapists charge a lot of money, and a lot of people don't have that. So first of all, the question to ask yourself is, what can you do from a pricing strategy standpoint, which I will address immediately after this, like just after we finish this. What can you do from a pricing strategy standpoint to make this easier for your patients, right? So for example, a lot of countries have mental health insurance, right? Unfortunately, we don't have that here in India unless it is provided to you covered, like either by the government, like for example in Canada, or it's covered by whatever educational institute you're studying in, stuff like that. So let's assume that people coming to your startup are people who don't have this kind of coverage. In that case, certain things you can do is staggered payments, right? Where you sort of tell them that they do not have to pay like a per session model, but instead like they can have a subscription model where they say yearly they pay a certain amount and they're covered. Like they can take 6 sessions at any point of time throughout the year, and the whole thing is covered. That is one, going for a subscription model. The other is actually having an installment system where let's say if it's 3,000 user has the option of paying that in 4 installments or 2 installments so that it's not a lot, right? And you settle it separately with the therapist, in which in most cases you actually pay it out of credit and then you settle it with the user on this side. So we'll talk about these things, but you need to ensure that you do everything from your end as much as possible to make this simple, to offer solutions. But in spite of doing all of this, if your user is still not able to pay, in that case it's a failure mode, because you can't go beyond what you've already done, right? So in that case it's beyond your control, so then that's a failure mode. So basically, if you've done everything from your end and you still can't do anything about that because it's still outside the scope of your project, then it's a failure mode. Simple. Makes sense, Kshitija?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Now, moving on. So very quick recap. Sabko pata hai ye kya cheez hai? Everybody knows what this is. Yeah, is there someone who absolutely has no idea what you're seeing on the screen, has never seen this ever in your lives, and you don't know how this works? Ya fir kya hai ye rectangular nonsense? Lean canvas, Kshitija, it's actually not the lean canvas, it's the business model canvas, but fair enough. PMC, okay. Does anybody not know what this is? Can you let me know? Like, can you let me know in the chat, raise your hand, virtually or whatever. Someone who doesn't know ki absolutely ye hai kya? Anyone? Okay. Can I move forward with the assumption that everybody at least has some awareness of what this is? Sounds good. Can I move forward with that assumption? Okay. Now, let me, so you guys know that this is the business model canvas. It's an open source tool, freely available on the internet. It basically helps you plan your business and everything that goes around it. Okay. It has 9 blocks, and these 9 blocks represent everything that your business has to do. So I'm basically moving towards the pricing strategy and financial model. But before I get to that, it's important that you understand what this is right here. Okay. So it has value propositions, customer relationships, channels, which means distribution channels, customer segments, key activities, key resources, key partners, cost structure, and revenue streams. Very self-explanatory. It's exactly what it is. Okay. Now, for those of you who have not met me before in any workshop, this next part might be new to you, but if you already know this, that's awesome. So I personally have a certain way of filling this. It's something that I've realized like after running startups myself and understanding the questions you usually have at very early stages, because you can't answer all of them. Like if I suddenly ask you what is your cost structure, most of you don't know that. And that's completely okay. You're not supposed to know these things at the very early stage. So there's a certain way for you to plan your entire business, and which is why, like personally, I believe that there's a very intuitive way of feeling this, which makes very perfect sense. At least to me, it does, right? And I'll share it with you, and you can let me know if it makes sense to you. Now, the first thing that you started with, I'm going to keep this very, very quick because this is, a very early stage stuff that most of you should know by now. But this is basically how you fill this. Okay, first thing you figure out is आपका value proposition क्या है. Value proposition बोले तो USP. What is it that you offer? Do you offer convenience, speed? Is your value proposition the fact that people can just sit at home and book a session? Sit at home and order groceries. Are you offering? Let's say, is it making it more efficient? Like, are you making a old system work even better? Stuff like that. So, what is your value proposition? Which is basically, what is it that you're offering your customers for which they should pay you money, right? This is the first thing you figure out. Now, let me ask this question, very quick. Any guesses? Once you know what your value proposition is, what's the next question you should have an answer to? Any guesses? Like once you know what this is, intuitively, what do you think? जब आपको पता चल जाए कि आप क्या बेच रहे हो, next क्या होना चाहिए? Any guesses? What should we figure out next for this to make sense?
कैसे बेचना है?
Activities. Okay. Customer segments. All right, here is the answer. The next thing you figure out is आप किसको बेच रहे हो. जब आपको पता है आप क्या बेच रहे हो, immediate next question you should be like, okay, I know what my product is. Now let's figure out who are we selling this to. You should have the answer. Who is your target market? We discussed this on week 1, if you remember. What is your market size? Who is your target market? आपका user persona क्या है? उनका behavior क्या है? Traits क्या है? किसको target करोगे? If your market is, let's say, every English speaking bachelor in metropolitan cities in India, maybe your target market for launch, you say that, okay, I will only launch in Mumbai English speaking bachelors who work in IT MNCs of the age group 26 to 35. That becomes a very niche target market that you start with for launching your product, getting some feedback, and then slowly expanding it to everyone else, right? So the next thing you figure out is आप किसको बेच रहे हो, exactly है कौन वो, पूरा user persona, all the details, that's what you figure out. So you know आप क्या बेच रहे हो, आप किसको बेच रहे हो. What do you think you figure out next? This is like playing like Tombola or like Housey on a Sunday. Next क्या है? What is next? Channels, okay? Anyone else wants to give it a shot? Revenue streams? Kshitija, like एक choose करो ना. Let's see if you win. Anybody else wants to give it a shot? Anybody else? Okay. The next thing that you figure out, आप क्या बेच रहे हो, आप किसको बेच रहे हो? Next thing, of course, is channels, which means आप कैसे बेचोगे? How will you sell it? Like, will this be self-service? Are you going to deliver it in their house? You know, is it automated? You know, how are they going to find out about your product or service? How do they actually can they see a demo before they buy, or do they have to pay money before they can use it? How will this be delivered? How does the purchase happen? Online, offline? मॉडल क्या है परचेज का, सब्सक्रिप्शन है, वन टाइम पेमेंट है, वगैरह वगैरह, राइट? सो क्या बेच रहे हो, किसको बेच रहे हो, उसके बाद कैसे बेच रहे हो, व्हिच मींस योर डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन चैनल्स. Any guesses what's next once you know those three things? What do you think we should figure out next? Any ideas? आपको पता है आप क्या बेच रहे हो, आपको पता है आप किसको बेच रहे हो, आपको पता है कैसे बेच रहे हो. रेवेन्यू, ओके. क्षितिजा, पैसा बनाएंगे हम, टेंशन मत लो. आई नो दिस इज द मेजर इश्यू दैट यू हैव. Anybody else? Give it a shot. Let's see if you're correct. Take a guess. Cost structure, okay. और कोई? All right, here is your answer. You figure out how will you build and maintain relationships with your customers. So you know आप क्या बेच रहे हो, आप किसको बेच रहे हो, आप कैसे बेच रहे हो. Next thing you want to figure out is how will you bridge the gap between those customers and you, which means how do you build relationships with your future possible customers, right? That is one, like people who are not your customers right now but may end up being your customers sometime in the future. So that at the same time, how do you maintain relationships with existing customers, right? So that's what you figured out next. So क्या बेच रहे हो, value propositions, फिर customer segment किसको बेच रहे हो, कैसे बेच रहे हो, distribution channel, and then how do you build and maintain your customer relationships with both future potential customers and existing customers. Got it? What's next? Intuitively आपको क्या लगता है, जब आपको ये चार चीजें पता है तो क्या करना चाहिए हमें? By the way, I'm rushing through this because it's like very basic stuff. I want to get into how this applies to you guys. What's next? Resources, okay. Anyone else wants to give it a shot? बोली लगाओ. Next क्या है? Let's see if you're correct. Revenue stream. आकाश वर्मा, कॉलेज में आरएस का मतलब कुछ और ही होता है. I hope you know that. Anyone else?
I'm just confused, like customer relationship पहले क्यों आना चाहिए? Like, you know, if you haven't decided the cost structure of your product, how are you going to make, you know,
your answer is going to be, your question is going to be answered in exactly 3 steps, Kshitija. If it's not, ask me again and I'll tell you, okay?
Sure.
Your answer is coming up. All right, so web of cost structure. Okay, so the next thing that you figure out is key activities. All right, now here is why. Once you know all of those 4 things on the side, which means आप क्या बेच रहे हो, किसको बेच रहे हो, कैसे बेच रहे हो, how will they discover your product or service, how will they see your demo, how will this be delivered, how will purchase happen, will you provide support, फिर आपको पता है customer relationship कैसे maintain कर रहे हो आप, will you set up a call center, will you send them weekly emails, do you need someone to actually help troubleshoot, do you need someone to help set up their project, like Sahil is going to require this. So once you know all of these things, you then can very objectively write down your key activities, which is basically what activities do you need to perform as a startup in order to be able to do all of those other 4 things on the side. As a startup, what do you need to perform? Like, what are the daily operations or what activities do you need to perform in order to fulfill those 4 things on the side that we just discussed? So for example, you may know that because distribution channel mein you're going to set up your own e-commerce website for people to purchase your product or service. A key activity is going to be building a web platform and maintaining a platform, purchasing a payment gateway, let's say, or like subscribing to a payment gateway that people can use. Maybe customer relationship mein you realize that somebody has to set this up for people in their homes because you're using a very sensitive hardware startup is what you're running. So key activities mein aa jayega that you need to run a support team that's going to be able to do that. Maybe you're selling something like a biodegradable sanitary pad, right? In that case, and you're selling this to, let's say, your customer segment is the rural market segment, right? In that case, you know that you will have to run a to the women who will be your customers and figure out a way for them to sell your product to them. So that is when you know what your key activities are, because aapko pata hai that all the 4 things that you're doing on the side, you can objectively think of what key activities must you perform in order to fulfill everything else on the side that we just discussed, right? Makes sense? Okay. What do you think is next? When you figure out your key activities and all of those other 4 things, what do you think we should figure out next? So key activities is basically all the activities you need to perform in order to fulfill uh, everything on the right that we just discussed. What activities must you perform as a startup, right? Any guesses what's next? Anybody? We have exactly 5 things left, so we're getting there. Any guesses? Take a shot. Key resources, okay? Resources. All right, you guys are right. You figure out your key resources immediately after this. It's a good time to figure this out, because when you're answering key resources, you need to ask yourself the question, in order to do the key activities that we just figured out, what are the resources that we need, right? In order to perform those key activities, which is on the basis of the 4 things we figured out, uske hisab se ye key activities hai. Then you ask yourself the question, in order to perform those key activities, what resources do we need what resources do we need, So for example, this could be physical resources, like let's say Sahil startup requires the algae, right? Chlorella V that he's using. So that's a physical resource that he requires. He needs to have enough algae in his inventory in order to make his product, right? So physical resources. It could also be stuff like computers, and maybe you need to actually. So if you were a furniture company, your physical resource would actually be a showroom. You need a showroom for people perhaps to be able to walk in and see these furnitures, stuff like that. Uh, you could also have, let's say, financial resources. Is there money? Is there capital that you require? Do you have operational expenses that you will somehow have to absorb? So financial resources. You also have human resources. Do you need to hire somebody? Sales team, right? Do you need to build a sales? Ramana had this problem, right? So he needed to build a tech team in order to perform his key activities, and one of which was, of course, configuring and making his product ready for shipment and to meet the client's needs, right? So is there any human resource? Do you need to do some hiring? Shitaja and Mansi, you have a human resource requirement of having therapists, right? Because you can't do that yourself. You need to hire people or partner with therapists, right? You could also have intellectual resources, by the way. So intellectual resources is different from human resources. Important for you to understand this. Intellectual resources means, is there a skill you need to acquire? Like, for example, does your team need to know, like, let's say, web development in order for this to work? Or do you need to learn more about how mental health works in order to make your app work? Or for example, Akash, do you need to know more about hotel management in order to make an app that is supposed to help automate hotel management, right? So that is an intellectual resource. Got it? So 4 kinds of resources, just so that you understand. Physical resources, as the name suggests. Human resources, do you need to hire people? Do you need to make a team? Vagera, vagera. Financial resources, simple to understand. And intellectual resources. Is there a skill that you need to have as a team or as an individual running a company to make it work? So again, once you know your key activities, you try to answer key resources, which means what are the resources that you need in order to perform your key activities. That's what you figure out, right? Any guesses what's next? Any guesses what is next? We just have 3 things left. Any guesses? Any guesses? What do we feel next? Partners, okay. All right. You're right, Himanshu. You figure out key partners. And here is why. And here is how you do this. You ask yourself the question that you look at your key resources and you ask yourself the question, what are the resources that we need but currently lack? And for them, you forge partnerships, right? So again, partnerships are not random. Like partnerships always have a strategy. The most simplified version of this is exactly what I just said, which is you look at your key resources and you ask yourself the question, what are the resources that we need but currently lack? And then you forge partnerships for those resources, right? You just don't just randomly forge partnerships, right, with anybody out there. So Mansi and Shreya, if you remember, I had asked this question to you the last time we spoke, where you were talking about your partners, and I asked you this question on what basis do you forge partnerships, and you were a little confused with that question, like the answer to that question. So the answer is right here. Whenever you onboard a partner of any kind, like this would be, let's say you decide to outsource the development of your app to another app development company, third party, and you make them that would be a partnership. So in that case, it's because you need an app and you currently don't have the resources for building a human resource that you need is your own tech team, and maybe you don't have the money to pay this and none of you have the skills. So in that case, you do a partnership because a tech team is something you need but currently lack. And why do you need a tech team? Because a key activity would be that you need an app in order to deliver that service, which again comes from things on the right? So it's very strategic, it's very precise. For very specific reasons you forge partnerships, and not just randomly. Otherwise you're going to have too many it's like too many cooks spoil the broth. Like you'll be taking advice and making partnerships randomly with all kinds of people but getting nowhere. You will exhaust your time, you will exhaust your resources, and ultimately it's not going to lead to any progress of your company, right? So again, key partnerships, you look at your resources and you ask yourself the question, what key resources do we currently need but do not have? For those, you forge partnerships. Yeah. Now coming to the last two, what do you think we fill next? Is it cost structure or revenue streams? Revenue streams, okay. Vaibhav, anybody else? Do you think it's cost structure or do you think it's revenue streams? What should be next? Cost, okay. Streams, okay. All right, here is the answer. And this is the answer to your question, Kshitija. After doing all of that, now is a time when you can actually objectively ask yourself the question, ये सारे चीजें ऊपर जो हमने किए, ये सब करने के लिए हमारा कॉस्ट कितना होएगा, and where exactly will we be spending that money? So I don't think any of you may, I'm not sure if anybody here has experience in actually pitching to investors, and nobody here has experience in actually getting money from investors. But I'll tell you from my personal experience, okay? And this is common across like everybody who has ever pitched to an investor or raised money. Most people think that हमें बस कैसे भी $1 million चाहिए and we'll be able to make it grow, एकदम perfect dream company बन जाएगा. But a question every investor asks is that if I give you $1 million right now, tell me 10 places where you will spend that money, how much will you spend that money, and why will you spend that money? That's the question you get asked all the time. It's not just enough to know how much money you need. It's important for you to understand आपका cost structure क्या है. You should be able to specifically say that, you know what, this is my cost, here is all the places where I'll be spending money, and this is exactly how much money it will cost me in a certain month, in a certain year, or whatever is your billing cycle, right? And you can objectively and practically answer that only when you've done all of those things on top, which is why you do it towards the end. So for example, if a key activity is that you need to build an app, if a resource is a human resource, maybe all of you are commerce graduates, nobody has a technical expertise, and a human resource that you need is a tech team. So you partner with an external tech team and you tell them that you're going to structure में आ जाएगा. पहले आपको नहीं पता चल रहा ये सब चीज, and there are very very minute things that come realize. For example, that you realize. For example, a partnership might be is that you partner with a legal firm. Like Airbnb had to do this, like offer insurance coverage, to their hosts. So they would have to partner with a legal firm that would take a certain commission out. So in that case, it becomes a cost structure that you guys have to build it in. So you do cost structure in the end, because only after you see your entire business mapped out will you be able to say कि कितना पैसा खर्चा होगा, exactly कहाँ कहाँ खर्चा होगा, and क्यों खर्चा होगा, सबसे ज़्यादा ज़रूरी. Got it? Makes sense, everyone? Kshitija, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right. And of course, once you do that, the last thing you figure out is your revenue streams, right? You do this in the end because only after you have the entire picture, that is the perfect time to ask yourself the question, all right, now that we know this entire thing, I know exactly how much money I'm spending, where I'm spending, what am I doing, how much money can you make and how will you make it is the perfect. And by this, I don't mean something as simple as that we'll just sell and make money. That's not what I want. This is when you can actually figure out a financial strategy and a pricing strategy and a revenue model for yourself, because you have all the information you need to know what is going to be your profit margin, how, what is your capital expenses, what are your operational expenses, and all of that other stuff, right? Another advantage of filling your revenue streams in the end is that when you do this in the end, it allows you to see sometimes a key activity that you will be having to perform, and you figure out that, you know what, we just might be able to offer this as an alternate service and make an alternate revenue stream, right? The beauty of doing this in the end is आपको अचानक आइडिया आता है कि पता है this is an activity we'll anyways have to do, and what if we could also offer this particular activity as a standalone service and make money from it? And I'll give you a very specific example to highlight this point after this, but here is the beauty of this, okay? Just a quick recap. सबसे पहले we figure out हम क्या बेच रहे हैं, वैल्यू प्रोपोजिशन, उसके बाद किसको बेच रहे हैं, कस्टमर सेगमेंट, उसके बाद कैसे बेच रहे हैं, डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन चैनल, उसके बाद how will you build and maintain relationships with your existing customers and also your future potential customers, so customer relationships. After all of that, you move to the left, you figure out what are the key activities you need to perform to fulfill all of those things, 4 things on the right. So you write key activities, and then key resources, which is in order to perform those activities, what resources do you need? Uske baad key partnerships, what are the partnerships you need to make for the resources you need but currently lack, right? उसके बाद नीचे आता है कॉस्ट स्ट्रक्चर, किधर किधर खर्चा होगा, कितना खर्चा होगा, क्यों खर्चा होगा, very important. And finally, your revenue stream, which means how much money are you going to make, how will you make it, are there any alternate revenue options that you can somehow figure out? Now here is the beauty, and here is why I told you like this is how I like to do it and it makes sense to me. Look at this. You start from the center, you fill things on the right, then you fill things on the left, and then you fill the foundation. Here is an amazing thing that happens, okay? If you consider like the human brain to be like left brain and right brain, and so there are 2 hemispheres, right, that a cerebrum has in our brain. Now our right brain processes emotions, you know, creativity, empathy, all of that is right brain stuff, and our left brain is analytic, right? So logistics, analytics, you know, logical decisions, all of those things come from our left brain. So if you look at this BMC and treat it like a right and left brain stuff, everything on the right is got to do with your customers, so they have to do with empathy, right? It's all right brain stuff on the right, it's all got to do with your customers, it's all got to do with empathy. Everything on the left has to do with your business, your logistics, you know, it's very analytical in nature, and everything uske niche is the foundation, which is money. If you can't figure out the money piece, everything on top is going to crash no matter how well planned they are. That's why this makes sense to me. Makes sense, right? And it's a good way for you to also remember how to do this. Any questions before I move forward? It's important that you understand this before I start talking about revenue streams and pricing and financial models and all that. Make sense, everybody? Any questions? Can I move forward? Can you let me know in the chat or on your video or audio if I can move forward? All good? Okay, awesome. Now, here is an example. Like I said, कि revenue stream last में figure out करने का बहुत फायदा होता है, क्योंकि आपको alternate चीजें दिख जाता है कि you know what, until this happens, or you know, sometimes it helps you survive, by the way, and I'll give you one example for that also. But it just helps you understand other things you can do to sort of make money and make sure your project works, right? Because you got to hustle. Here is one example, बहुत famous example है. So why it makes sense to fill your cost structure and revenue model in the end. Now, early 2000 mein na, Amazon wanted to be the world's best online e-commerce marketplace, right? When they started, they were like, we want to be the world's best online e-commerce marketplace. Now, when they started doing this, one of the things that they realized is, you know, to do this, a key activity that we will have to perform as Amazon is that Hamara website should be the most optimized, the fastest loading, you know, people should have the best user experience, vagara, vagara. Now, back in the day, you would have to physically set up like an server infrastructure, right? didn't have cloud computing back in the early 2000s. So आपको physically like visit a server farm या तो फिर अपना घर पे आप server बनाओ, where you would have to manually like plug things in, connect it, set up like a server operating system. I don't know if you guys have ever done that, but आपको physically servers either खरीदना purchase करना पड़ता था from server farms where you go and plug it in and then you get registered there, या तो फिर आपको अपना बनाना पड़ेगा. Now because of that, Amazon had huge infrastructure costs in the early days. ठीक है, बहुत पैसा उनको खर्चा करना पड़ता था just to purchase hosting and server farms, like physically go there and plug things in, या तो फिर अपना बनाने के लिए. Now, what they decided is, you know what, we should completely stop relying on third-party providers. We should build our own server farm and our own server capacity. So what they started doing is they started building internal systems, right? Internal systems of, because they said we are not going to depend on anyone else. हम अपने पे invest करते हैं because that is our mission to be the world's best online e-commerce marketplace. This is important. It's an activity we need to perform. Our costs are getting very high, but you know what, we should just make our own stuff. So they started having their own server farm, they started building their own infrastructure, पूरा from scratch design किया वो ने अपने लिए, खुद के लिए. Now when they started doing that, they started thinking and they had this amazing like moment of realization or epiphany. जब उनको realize हुआ कि अरे हम जो startup थे और हमारा ये requirement था, there must be other companies also that have the same requirement, right? There must be other companies that want you know, like good hosting infrastructure but have to rely on these third party farms and plug it in वगैरह वगैरह. So they started thinking, you know what if हमने जो इतना पैसा खर्चा करके जो अपना कॉस्ट स्ट्रक्चर में दिख रहा है अभी, जो हमने अपना सर्वर फार्म और अपना इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बनाया है, what if we start renting it out to other startups? So the way they called it, Amazon said that, what if we can make an operating system for the internet jahan pe people don't have to worry about where it is hosted, you know, buying server space, you know, buying stuff like that, making it work. What if we could just rent our own technical infrastructure and cloud storage and cloud space to other startups taki their life becomes easier, right? And they identified this need. That is how very popular Amazon Web Services was born, right? It's because they realized that हम इतना पैसा खर्चा करके अपना world's best infrastructure बनाए, let's just rent it out to other people. Now we can make money from that because I'm sure there are other startups who have exactly the same requirement. That is basically the story of how Amazon Web Services was born. And here is the fun part, right? Netflix and Amazon Prime Video दोनों AWS में चलता है. And think about this, Netflix is a competitor to Amazon Prime Video, right? Prime Video is an internal product of Amazon. Netflix is a competitor. लेकिन their competitor is also their customer because they use Amazon Web Services, right? So Amazon figured out a way to make their competitors their customers by seeing a need that they had. It was in their cost structure and they realized that there must be other people also with the same need, and they decided to move it from the cost structure and make a revenue model out of this. And that's how Amazon Web Services was born. So Netflix and Amazon Prime Video both use AWS. That's the power of doing this in a structured way. It helps you figure out alternate possibilities of revenue streams that you can do. And this applies to everybody here, by the way. I'll give you a very simple example, okay? Very simple. Like, this is something I have as notes and I was keeping this for Friday, but let me just shoot it out there. For example, Mansi and Kshitija as Rahi, one of the things that they may realize is a key activity that they need to perform is, and the assumption is sabko yahan pe pata hai what Rahi does. So let's say a key activity that they perform is that they have to constantly maintain and update calendars and scheduling and bookings and appointments of their therapists. And they know that, you know, this is something that they need. So, you know, possibly somewhere down the line, they may realize, you know what if we actually make a service that simply allows therapists to manage their calendar, even if they're not a part of Rahi? Like, what if every therapist in India starts using a calendar management and scheduling application that is designed by Rahi, but you don't have to be a Rahi therapist to do this. You can use it in your office. Everybody, like, that is a genuine need that therapists have. It is something that Rahi has to do anyways as a part of their app. And what if they just suddenly decide to make this as a service? It applies to Akash. Akash has to understand how hotels work. And because this is going to make him, if you're not already Akash, and this is what I told you for the last 2 weeks, you need to know hotel management better than you know quoting. Please stop thinking in terms of features. You need to start thinking in terms of hotel management. If you become so good at this, you can become a consultant offering, you know, for free. You know, like, let me spend 1 week with you, and Swarnali can do this as well. Let me spend 1 week with you and tell you how you can fix, like, one of your processes so that it saves you time. Even if you're not a customer, maybe you just charge extra for that. It applies to Swarnali where she's deciding to get into delivery, and people like Swiggy have done this, right? So for example, Swiggy delivered food from restaurants, and they were doing it so much that during the pandemic they realized that one of the cost structures that we had is we had to build our own delivery team. So they were like, why don't we offer delivery as a service for free, even if they don't want to buy any food from restaurants? So that is why on your Swiggy app, if you open it, you're going to see something called Swiggy Genie. So Swiggy Genie allows you to pick up anything from anywhere and deliver it to any other part of the city using Swiggy's delivery system. That's how they figured out that a key activity and a cost structure that they had can be offered as an external service as well, right? And that's how Swiggy met Swiggy Genie. This is also applicable to Swarnali because she'll be doing this. So doing this in the end allows you to see possible scope for other alternate revenue models that sometimes help companies survive. At times when their primary revenue model is not working well due to some reason or the other. That's how Swiggy, by the way, managed to survive the fact that not many people were ordering food in the middle of the lockdown because they started offering delivery services for medicines. That's how they survived, right? Airbnb has also survived in the past using something very similar. If you want to know what it is, I'll tell you at the end of the session. But does that make sense? Do you see the power of why you should do this in the end and how it sometimes allows you to possibly identify alternate sources of revenue, that is within the scope of what you're doing, and you can just offer it on the side. Make sense, everyone? Are we good? Okay. Now, this is Amazon's business model canvas. In case you're interested, you want to look at it, take a screenshot. I'm not going to explain it. It's very self-explanatory. Take a screenshot. It's also recorded. This is for Airbnb. Same thing again. You can read and see how they figure their things out. This is for Uber, their answers of how they figure stuff out. And this is a lean canvas. Pretty solid, very similar to the business model canvas. I'm not going to talk in details about what it does, but it's more applicable to startups, especially startups at very early stages, because it starts with like, what are the 3 problems you're solving? What are the existing alternatives? What is the solution? What are the key metrics? But something I really love about this particular model is right here in the center, which is high level concept, right? So a high level concept is like an X for Y analogy. So for example, if someone asks you, and Ramana asked this question today as well in the beginning, like if you had exactly 2 seconds to explain an idea, how would you explain it? So a good way to explain that sometimes people do is like saying that I'm making Tinder for investors, where let's say startups come, and if you like a startup, you're interested in talking to them for investment, you right swipe. If you don't like a startup, you left swipe. You really love a startup, you just swipe up, right? So that's how it works. So like Tinder for investment, or like, for example, saying YouTube is Flickr for videos, stuff like that. We made a project in Mozambique, and that project, like our X for Y analogy was that it was Uber for malaria, right? So for malaria testing, so it was like Uber for malaria testing. If you think you have the symptoms, you book it, somebody will come, take your readings, go and give you a report, right? So Uber for malaria testing, stuff like that. So an X for Y analogy is very powerful. It helps you communicate your idea very simply to a stakeholder or someone who doesn't know what you're working on. It also helps give you clarity of thought. And because you're talking about uh, you're comparing it to a product that exists in the market, it's better for people to understand it, right? So an X for Y, and I will revisit this concept in week 4 when I talk about storytelling, but just something I love. Again, you can take a screenshot, freely available on the internet, take it, use it, play around with it, very powerful. Right now, why did I go through the trouble of getting into these details is because I want to focus on 3 things for figuring out our financial strategy and our pricing strategy. The 3 things are distribution channels, cost structure, and revenue streams. These 3 things is going to help us figure out how do we price our product, how do we make projections, how do we calculate profit margins and everything else. All right. Now we're going to get started with distribution channel, but before that, do you guys want like a quick, let's say, 7-minute break, because we've been sitting for quite some time? Do you want to get up, stretch around a little bit? You want to take a 7-minute break, get something to eat, drink some water, stretch around a bit? Make sense, everyone? Yeah, awesome. Let's take a quick 7-minute break. I'm going to switch off my video, but I'm here in case you want to ask something. Please get up from your desk, stretch, thoda sa, drink some water, and we'll connect back. Let me put on a timer right here. All right. See you guys in 7 minutes. How's it going, guys? All good so far? Koi sawal? Is it useful? You can switch on your cameras just to make sure that you guys are okay and still here. Sab theek hai. If you want, I'm going to start sharing my screen. Any questions? Sakit, what's up? Kshitija, how's it going?
Awesome.
Awesome.
Very insightful, the session.
Okay.
And not boring.
Thanks. Good to know that. I mean, do you guys think that 3 hours is a bit much? Itna बैठ के करना पड़ रहा है तब से. You guys feel that? You feel that, Kshitija?
I feel that.
Yeah.
Sometimes, but yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, like, you're listening, but think about me and what I'm doing for 3 hours. More than that, actually. I have to keep talking. But this is fun. Like, I'm not going to deny it. Like, my whole thinking of doing this is like, these are questions that I didn't have the answers to when I started out for the first time, and nobody told me about these things. So it took me a lot of time to figure these stuff out, test it on my own, and then try it, and then sort of really like get to that point. So my job is always to make sure that I can help as many people out there going through a similar journey, address this as early as possible, and not like maybe it's going to take you like 2 years what it took me 10 years to do, and I'll be so happy if like I'm able to facilitate that, by taking away some of those mistakes. What's up Shibani? Kya haal hai? All good?
Yeah.
Ramana, you're still here. You said 2.5 hours ago that you're leaving. I mean, this is awesome, but should I take it as a compliment, a good thing? Ramana, if you're here. All right, while we wait for that, how's it going, the rest of you? Good? You finding this useful? Shivani, you finding this useful?
Yeah, I'm finding this useful.
Does it fall under your favorite self-help genre? Yeah?
Yeah, like it's pretty insightful learning about new things.
Nice. That's awesome. Do you have any questions, by the way? Anything you want to ask? Even if it's nothing to do with what we discussed about, anything at all. कोई सवाल किसी का? किसी का कोई सवाल? Anything?
Is it raining that side? Pune?
It was raining sometime back. Abhi it's not raining yet, but it's about to start. I hope it rains because it's very hot. Yeah, but I'm not
You're in
complaining.
Pune.
Yeah, I'm in Pune right now, but I'm not complaining because I stayed, like, I'm from Bombay actually, and Bombay is like hot. Like, I mean, Bombay में 3 weather होता है. Hot, hotter, hottest. Like, hot is winter, hotter is monsoon मान लो, hottest is summer. So I'm not complaining at all, but I hope it rains.
How do you manage your productivity levels? Walking throughout the day and like.
Good question. Long answer I'll give you in the end. Short answer that I can tell you right now. You can stop recording temporarily, Saket. What is this?
Sahan is.
Okay. So I think short answer is that I'm really bad at time management. Like, I'm also learning it myself. I think I'm better than what I used to be, but I'm still not very good at it yet. But so I technically have to do a lot of stuff during the day, and I'm sure like even Ramana, like, he knows this as well. Like, when you run a business or when you have multiple things happening, there's a lot going on, right? And I'm also becoming self-aware of the fact that I'll probably like not be staying by myself my whole life. I'm going to have a family like sometime in the next few years, right? So yeah, because I'm getting old, I'm not always going to be 20 and in my 20s, right? So the question is like, think about this. Like, it's very hard for you to manage your life with everything else going on, right? Like right now, it's easiest. You have nothing to worry about at all. So one of the things that has always helped me is you got to get better at saying no to things. This has been one thing that I've been really good at. Like, if I think I have just one skill at time management, that is saying no, like having the courage and also the foresight to be able to say no to things. Because look, dude, like all of us have 24 hours, right? You, me, um, Mark Zuckerberg, right? Or anybody else. All of us have 24 hours exactly. We don't have more time. To do in those 24 hours is key. So the most usual question I get asked is that I don't have the time to do something. Like what do I do about that? And the question is that nobody has time. You need to make time, right? And also, when you do more things in life, you actually have the time to do more things. Somebody told me this when I was in college. I didn't understand what the hell. I'm like, kuch bhi bol raha hai. Like, what does that mean? Like, when you do more things, you have more time to do things, is exactly what I'm like. What does that mean? Like, how can I have more time to do things if I'm doing more things, right? Because usually you think कि कम चीजें करेंगे तो ज्यादा चीजें कर पाएंगे. That's not true. आप ज्यादा चीजें करते हो तो आप ज्यादा चीजें कर पाते हो. You know why? Because you do a lot of things. Like when you're playing sports, you're running a company, you know, you maybe have a child to take care of, you have two side hustles, you have a day job, you're writing a paper, you're writing a book, you maintain articles, you run a podcast. When you do so many things now, you as a human being and also your brain gets better at being able to process and like compartmentalize tasks you have to do the whole day. And because you're constantly doing that, you get better at making time for doing things. So I have validated this myself. Like now, because there is so much that I do, I actually have more time to do things. On days when I do nothing, I feel like I don't have the time to do anything. You know, so like my best days are one where I do 15 different things at work, but I also have the time to do things I love. Maybe I have the time to go out for a date with my loved one. Like everything, like nothing has to wait. Like when you do more things, you have more time to do things. Right? So that's just something that has really helped me. Saying no. So basically, two things. Short answer for you, Shitaja. Got to learn when and how to say no to stuff you don't need in your life. Please, right? Like get rid of excess baggage and like whatever is taking your time, you don't need to do it. Even like whatever, like it could mean anything, you know. And it's very difficult, especially when your friends are involved. Like for example, um, like very early stages, I couldn't party every weekend. Like I could only party like let's say 2 weekends a month or 1 weekend a month, because the other 3 weekends I was working. So I had to learn how to say no to my friends. It was very hard, like very, very hard, right? Like saying no to your friends is, I think, the most difficult thing you will do at this stage in your life. So it was very difficult, but like everybody understands and it works out. But you got to have that courage to say no to things you don't want. But at the same time, please don't become one of those losers who's only like working and not having fun in their lives. Like, please have fun, okay? Like, in fact, have more fun. So, yeah, just that.
Rohan,
Bola,
one
Sagar.
last question. Yeah.
Bola.
I read about you. You are from Northeast, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Would you like to tell anything about that part? Because we are not that much similar or familiar about that. Any
बहुत
memories,
कुछ है
any.
बोलने का. I will tell you this at the end of the session. Ask me this question. I'll tell you a very fun story about Northeast that very few people know about. Like something that happened, like in the like from that part as well. I actually said this like in my TED talk, but I will
Yeah.
talk about this in more details later on. Okay, Saket, ask me this again. All right. Now, should we get back? All good? Feeling good? Are we good to go? All right. Quick time check. We're running about half an hour late. Today's session is going to end at 8:30. Sounds good? Is that okay with everyone? With everybody? Yeah? Sagar, Rajshuk, Himanshu, Akash, Mansi, Shitaja. Good? Mansi, it's good for you. It's good for most people. You're like the busiest person here. Okay. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Let me know when you can see it. So present. All right, now we're getting into the hardcore stuff, right? Which is like pricing and all of that stuff. But before that, let's answer a couple of very basic questions about your startup that you should know. Okay. Can you see my screen? Yeah. All right. Now, so देखो सबसे important सवाल इससे पहले कि आप pricing समझो सबसे important सवाल, and this is related to everything I'm talking about today has to do with pricing only, by the way, except the very first part. That is something that was remaining from the last session. Everything has to do with pricing only. तो सुनो, सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट चीज है कि डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन चैनल जो मैंने बोला, विच इज आप कैसे बेचोगे. जब आपको ये पता है कि आप कैसे बेचोगे, उसके बाद आप ये डिसाइड कर सकते हो कि वो सर्विसेज के लिए प्राइस क्या होना चाहिए, राइट? एंड हाउ विल यू प्रेडिक्ट, प्रोजेक्ट, ऑल ऑफ दोस थिंग्स. So when you're trying to figure out your distribution channel, there are actually 5 steps to this, 5 areas that you should have clarity on. Okay, and I'm just going to walk you through what those are. So number 1 is discovery phase. Okay, you need to answer the questions: how will your customers find out about your product or service? How can you ensure that they are thinking about you even when they don't need you immediately? इसका मतलब क्या होता है? Now, most people, when I ask this question, how will your customers find out about your product or service? Most people say something like social media, like they will find out on social media when other people share our posts or stories. But you know what? That means nothing. You don't have a strategy then. You're just depending on like destiny. If हो सकता है कि अगर सही यूजर देख लिया अपना सही स्टोरी तो आ जाएगा, and फिर so you can't rely on destiny. Like that's not a strategy, right? Relying on destiny is not strategy. You need to make this work consciously. So even if your answer is social media, you got to understand who are these users on social media that will end up using your product or service. So one of the ways to do this is to profile even the people on social media who you expect will follow your page. What that means is जो लोग हमारे पेज को फॉलो करेगा, मान लो कि if the answer is कि हमारे Instagram page is one of the major ways in which someone will find out about a product or service, you got to start asking this question: who are these people who would want to follow our page? Who are they really? And please don't say something like they are facing the same problem we are. That's fine, but apart from them, ये है कौन? Has anybody here ever run a Facebook or Instagram targeted ad? Anybody here? Has anyone run an ad on Facebook or Instagram? किसी ने कोई सोशल मीडिया कैंपेन चलाया, एड पैसा देके एड चलाया किसी ने? Anyone? Okay. When you run ads now, a very interesting thing that Facebook asks you is that they ask you to list other similar pages or interests that the user may have apart from being interested in what you are trying to sell, right? So for example, let's say that your customer segment is young people, age groups 18 to 25, and you want them to follow a page that, let's say, is on mental health because you're a mental health company, or let's say it's a page that offers let's say sex education courses for adults as well as kids, or maybe you're a company that offers, let's say, design services, you know, like custom made t-shirts, let's say, whatever. Then you got to ask yourself the question: apart from following our page, what are the other things they're interested in? So let's say if it's a young demographic, you know that these people will also be interested in maybe following thrift stores, right? Because purchasing from thrift stores is a trend that is usually taken up by young people, right? Or maybe they're going to follow certain kinds of celebrities. Maybe these are people who are interested in things like the Black Lives Matter movement. So that allows you to understand what are the other pages or groups or communities or topics that your users are interested in, because then that allows you to target content specifically for them. So you're going to then start thinking, you go to, let's say, a thrift store page, which is very popular in Delhi, and you start thinking, you know what, all of these people who are right now following this page, how can I get at least 60% of these people to follow my page, because they're exactly the demographic that would be interested or is facing the problem that I'm trying to offer a solution from. So it has to be targeted. It just can't be something like social media. That makes no sense. Okay. Startup like Akash, what you're doing, I said this the last time as well, even in B2B, you actually deal with a person, with a business. There is somebody out there sitting who's going to make a decision. So you got to start yourself asking yourself the question कि ये जो hotel manager है, what is this person interested in? How will they find out about me, even if they never met me? if they cannot find out about your product or service without meeting you as a founder, then you're failing. How can they find out about you even when they have never met you? They don't know, they have not come to a workshop, they've never been to a pitch, nothing, right? And the second part is that मान लो कि someone reaches out, sees your, finds out about you, but they don't need your service right now. But how can you ensure कि the moment they need your service, they'll think of you, right? You can't keep selling them things. Otherwise, that is a big turn off. Like, I don't think anybody here follows a page that just tries to sell you things, right? Nobody does that. You are interested in stuff that speaks to you as a person. So how can you ensure that people are constantly thinking about you, engaging with you, even when they don't want anything from you? Because only then, the moment they want that service or they face that problem, you are the first person they'll come to, because they anyways think about you, right? So that's your discovery phase. The next is evaluation. पता चल गया customers को आपके बारे में. What you got to answer is, can your customers experience a demo before deciding that they want to buy? And how can you make this as easy as possible? Very simple. Netflix offers 1 month for free, right? No questions asked. Credit card भी नहीं चाहिए, right? Just sign up, make an account, use it for free for 1 month. एक महीने बाद we start charging you. So that allows people to get a taste of what you're offering, and it also builds a lot of loyalty, because if you have the confidence to offer something for free, more often than not they would love it, right? So, and do not treat your free customers any different than your paid customers. Don't be like one of those companies that says कि अरे ये तो free का customer है, इसको छोड़ो, इसका email अभी नहीं answer करते, पहले paid वालों का करते. Don't do that. If you are a hypocrite when it comes to free versus paid customers, your entire model is not going to work, right? Again, culture is everything. So you got to ask yourself this question: can they see a demo? By the way, जरूरी नहीं है कि demo मिले. हो सकता है इसका answer is no, they can't. For example, if you were selling like a Nataraj pencil, they can't see a demo. But लेना है तो लो, नहीं तो if you're selling a toothbrush, you can't use the brush for 1 month and then tell them कि हाँ मुझे ये खरीदना. You can't do that. There's no demo. चाहिए लेके जाओ, पैकेट खोल लिया तो तुम्हारा. You got to pay for it. That also is possible. But you at least need to answer this question. When you've answered that, you want to go on to purchase, which is how will your customers purchase or buy your product or service, right? Will they give all the money at once? Will they give the money in installments? Will they have a subscription service? Online payment करेंगे, check लिखेंगे, draft लिखेंगे, briefcase में पैसा भर के लाएंगे 12 बजे रात को, ब्रिज के नीचे आपको पैसा देंगे when nobody is watching. How will they purchase, right? Basically, how does that take place? Once the purchase happens, you got to answer delivery. How will your product or service reach your customers after they have purchased? How will it be delivered? Is there any setup involved? So, for example, Sahil from this cohort, his start setup करके देना है. वो setup involved अगर है तो कौन करेगा setup? Is it like IKEA, which is like build your own furniture? You know, it's almost like Lego. It makes it fun. Or will somebody have to come and set it up for you, right? If you don't have the staff to do this, sometimes when you list your product on Amazon, Amazon offers setup services for things like furniture. जहाँ पे आपका लोग नहीं, Amazon का कोई setup कर देगा. No problems at all, right? But you got to answer that whether you need it. In that case, by the way, something like Amazon becomes a setup of the furniture itself, right? So key partnerships में आता है वो. And finally, support. You got to answer the question: what kind of support will your team provide post delivery, also pre delivery, and how can you ensure that there is customer retention? या फिर repeat purchase कैसे हो सकता है, right? Very important to answer this. It gets a little tricky when it happens for things like, let's say, if you are a doctor offering a treatment, how do you get repeat customers? It's tricky, right? Because ठीक हो गया तो वापस क्यों आएंगे? It happens when you use empathy as a strategy. If they love your service, if they love the way you treat them, if they basically see the value in what you're providing, customers often become very loyal to you as a brand and become evangelists on your behalf, spreading the good word, even when you're not doing anything actively, right? But it's very hard to get to that level. But it's always great to start small and then scale it up, right? So a couple of questions that you should be sort of answering. Now, I'm just going to take 2 minutes, exactly 2 minutes, not more than that. Look at these questions, take a screenshot, see if you can answer them for your startup. I know 2 minutes is not enough to answer 5 questions. Pick up the most difficult one, see if you can answer it. If you have any questions specifically while you're thinking, let me know, right? So just take 2 minutes to see if you can answer these 5 questions, or if you have any doubts related to these, okay? 2 minutes exactly, I'm right here, you can ask me if there's anything.
Rohan? Ramana here.
Ramana, hi.
Hey, Rohan. Rohan, is it okay? And with the team that I step out 7:30, I had something else.
Absolutely, Ramana. It was such a pleasure. I think you were not around. I was really thanking you for being here for so long. Like, this means a lot to all of us.
No. It's my pleasure. I think every team here is doing so wonderfully well, and you are walking them through wonderfully well. Not that I'm just here to praise you or say you are good or you are bad, but there are few things which I really felt that I should also be answering few things, and almost I was getting becoming a participant, and that's the goodness of
Love
the
that.
program.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
also am enjoying that. But unfortunately, I just have to step out. I really wanted to be here till 8:15, but
Yeah.
I really appreciate this. I'll try and see the remaining recording. Guys, catch you guys
Absolutely.
again on mentoring day and if possible on Saturday. And there
Sounds
are
good.
good things happening. So bye, Rohan, and catch you all soon.
Thank you. Thank you for your support, Ramana.
Guys, just before I move out, anybody has anything to comment on the whole thing or anything to check with me? Kshitija, Shibani, Akash, Kimlia, Himanshu, Mansi, Ratsuk, Sagar. Anybody
No,
has
sir.
anything?
As of now, nothing.
That is fantastic to know. I'm happy that you guys are figuring out to answer these 5 things. All the best. Bye, guys.
Thank you, sir.
All right, guys. Are we good? Do you have any questions, any doubts, anything you're stuck with? It'll take time for you to figure these things out, but do you understand why we are doing it? किसी को कुछ पूछना है? Are we good? Everybody? Are we good? Yeah? Ratsuk, Shibani, Camellia, all good? Ratsuk, by the way, I haven't heard from you at all. Ratsuk, all good, man?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Everything is fine. Yeah.
Everything is fine? Are you having fun? Like, you didn't even say hi. क्या मतलब थोड़ा बहुत बात कर लिया करो.
Yes, sir.
All good, all good?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Awesome, awesome. All right. Now, let's get to this, of course. Everybody's favorite part, especially Kshitija's, right? There's a one thing she's been asking me like since like week one. But for everybody, Akash, for you as well, right? Finally, we are here. How do you price like a product, and what is the sort of thinking that goes into doing this? Now, I'm going to do this in 2 stages, okay? I'm going to take the most simplest, fundamental approach to understanding how pricing works today. And then I'm going to take the more advanced, subjective versions of making more sophisticated business models for you guys when we speak again on Friday. Okay, so I'm going to take the most fundamental version today just to help you understand, because most people get pricing wrong because you're usually trying to complicate this too much from the very beginning. So you build on it step by step. The assumption and the requirement is that everything that we have spoken about till this point, you should know about it, especially your distribution channel, because that clarity helps you take better decisions when you price your product. Okay. Now, having said that, let's look at how would you go about pricing a product. Like if someone tells you ki, the very famous Wolf of Wall Street example, right? Sell me this pen. So if I tell you sell me this watch, like how much will you decide to price this watch at if you're running a company or a startup? Now, before I get into that stuff, I'm going to talk about a very simple example which is one of my favorites of all time. Like very, very simple, okay? Let's say तुमको 1 लाख रुपए बनाना है, ठीक है? You want to make 1 लाख rupees. तुम्हारा टारगेट है मुझे 1 लाख रुपए कमाना है, मेरे पास एक प्रोडक्ट है. There are 5 different ways in which you can actually earn 5 lakh rupees. There are many ways, but I want to talk about 5 ways of earning, like making 1 lakh rupees by selling a product. Okay, so what you could do is you could sell 1,000 units of the product for 100 rupees each. You could sell 100 units of the product for 1,000 each, 10 units of the product for 10,000 rupees each, or maybe you just sell 5 units of the product for 20,000 each, right? Any, sorry, there's actually 4 ways, not 5 ways, my bad. Himanshu, also Wednesday is on 2nd, 2nd June, not on 4th June. It's just an internal joke that Himanshu and I have because of an email we were doing. This reminds me of that. So any of these 4 ways are actually going to end up earning 1 lakh. Exactly, like no matter which of these units you take. But it's very important for you to understand this because आप एक प्रोडक्ट को कैसे भी आप उसको 100 रुपीज पर यूनिट भी प्राइस कर सकते हो, 1,000 रुपीज पर यूनिट भी प्राइस कर सकते हो, 10,000 पर यूनिट भी कर सकते हो, 20,000 पर यूनिट भी कर सकते हो, राइट? Any of these are viable prices for a product. But pricing determine करने के लिए, it's very important for you to understand how many units of something do you have to sell to get somewhere, right? Now, if you look at these options, by the way, for those of you confused between, you know what about commission and stuff like that, it's pretty simple. Like commission also ultimately ends up with a number only. I'm focusing on that number because that's the money you'll make. Now, when you do this, the two options we are talking about, basically, if you take the first and last one is when you do high volume of sales for a low price, and the other is when you do a low volume of sales for a high price, right? So if you look at the first one, आपको actually you'll have to spend, of course, the price of each product is really low, but you'll have to sell a lot of units of that product to get to 1 lakh rupees, right? So it's very sales heavy. Like even though the product is priced low, you will have to find 1,000 customers or maybe sell 1,000 units of it. So you spend a lot of money, like resources and time in ensuring that the sales process can tackle the high volume of sales. And the other one is you can just focus on selling 5 units. Yes, the cost is quite high, but your target is very low, as in your sales volume is very low. 5 यूनिट बेचा 20,000 में तो 1 लाख हो जाएगा, right? These two basically represent the most common kinds of pricing strategy. One is where you go with a strategy where you price your product low and focus on high volume of sales to do that. And the other is when you price your product high, product or service high, and you focus on a low volume of sales to get to a certain target. Now, it's very subjective which of these. I mean, most people might look at the previous example and say, you know what, ये last वाला सबसे सही लग रहा है, 5 यूनिट बेचना है, 20,000 अपना per unit and हमारा हो जाएगा target meet. But you got to remember that there's a lot of factors that determine if that is feasible for you or not, right? For example, even to sell 5 units, you may have to speak to 10,000 people or try to sell to 10,000 people. That can happen. Maybe it's difficult to sell the product. So there's a lot of factors that determine it, and I want to talk about that. Now, certain factors or certain questions जिसके answers will help you determine how to price your product is this right here, right? So सबसे पहला is कि what is your product's manufacturing or maintaining cost? How high is that? Right? You got to figure that out. The second is what is the purchasing power or motivation of your customers, which means does your customer is your customer going to be willing to spend 20,000 rupees, or is that too much? Like maybe they cannot actually spend more than 1,000 rupees. In that case, you can't take the last two options. You will have to take one of the first two or something in between, right? So you got to know what the purchasing power is and how motivated is someone to actually sort of purchase your product. Is this a very urgent problem? Like is it a really like a very basic problem that everybody faces and they really want this, or is that something that they will consider as purchase it only when it's possible for them? So got to look at the purchasing power and motivation. You also got to look at your value proposition. Like, are you offering like a premium product or service, or are you offering something that is fast, easy, not very difficult for you to maintain, so your costs are also low? So in that case, what you can do is sell it for a low cost and to as many people as possible and increase your volume of sales, right? So you can go with the high volume, low sales strategy. You also got to ask, does your product or service have repeat value, right? Which means once they take your product or service, is there a chance that they will want to keep taking a product or service and buy multiple ones of them? If the answer is yes, sometimes a high volume, low price option works. Like for example, if you offer a service and once they use it, they will want to keep coming back to you. In that case, you know that the loyalty is high. You could go if the loyalty is high, if there is repeat value for it, you actually go for low volume, high price, because even though you close 5 deals, you know that those people, there's a high chance they keep coming back to you. It happens a lot with Apple users. Even though the products are extremely high priced, once they use Apple, they keep coming back because it has immense resell, like a retention value, not a resale value. Take another example, an opposite example of, let's say, selling a toothbrush. A toothbrush does not have any repeat or a retention value because there are multiple toothbrushes. People don't think so much about the toothbrush, right? So you don't want to sell it for very high cost because they will just pick anything else up from anywhere else and just get done with it. So you might as well sell it at a low cost, sell it to as many people as possible, because there's a high chance that these people will not repeat or come back to you, right? So you can do that. The next question is especially very important, which is how easy or difficult is it to sell your product? Sometimes you may be selling a product which is very difficult for you to sell. Like, you have to go through multiple negotiations, you have to pitch your product, you have to make people understand, like show them a demo, still handhold them. Like, for example, people who sell insurance, sometimes it's a little difficult for them to sell, or maybe you're offering a blockchain based solution. It's very difficult for you to sell your product because unless you are working in a niche, like very few people actually want something like this, right? uh, so you got to answer how easy or difficult is it to sell. If you realize that, it's actually very difficult to sell this product even to a single person, you should opt for going with a high volume low price strategy, because in that case, if it is really difficult to sell it to even a single individual, all you need to do is sell it to 5 people at a certain premium pricing to close your target, as opposed to really struggling it out with 1000 units of that product to 1000 people, and each sale is as difficult as the other at a lower price in order to close your target. Right? So if it's difficult to sell, go with low volume and high price. It's sometimes better, right? How big is the market for the problem you're addressing? If the market itself is very small, then it doesn't always make sense to go with a high volume low price setting, because you will not be able to get a volume of sales for that long, because the market itself is very small and niche, right? So you might instead sell it at a higher price and a lower volume of sales, right? And of course, the last thing you want to look at, how are your competitors pricing their products? Like I said, and like Akash mentioned in the beginning of this session, competitors is not a bad thing. Having competitors actually validates your product, it validates the problem. At the same time, it gives you solid research insights that you can actually use for your own benefit. For example, you can look at how competitors are pricing their products, and you'll be able to tell, are they going with high volume or low pricing, or low volume and high pricing? Why did they choose that? How is it working out for them? How can I innovate and make mine better, right? Now, a combination of the answers of this is actually going to help you decide whether you should go for high that is going to extract a commission on each transaction. For example, if you're a delivery startup, like what Swarnali is working on, or let's say if you were something like Razorpay or Stripe, which makes a payment gateway, because on every transaction you take like a very small fee from it, like usually less than 3%. You will have to focus on a high volume of transactions in order to close whatever your target is, to ensure that you can keep sustaining and operating. So if you work on a commission model, you will have to go with high volume and low price, because anything else does not make sense to you, right? So just a couple of questions out there. Uh, take take the next 30 seconds to just sit with this for a while, see if you understand it. If it makes sense, if it's all good, I'm going to move forward. But if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. I'm not done yet, by the way. I still haven't gotten to the math part, but let me know if you understand the philosophy of pricing strategy. Any questions so far? There are no wrong questions, by the way, so just feel free and ask. No stupid questions also. There's no such thing as a stupid question, is what I mean. Any questions, anything at all, doesn't matter what you feel about it, anything at all that you want to ask, anything that you don't understand. Anyone? All good? Everybody? Akash, all good?
So I don't know it's related to this or not, but I was actually, a bit confused, like, how people manage to have subscription based services. For example, like your dose has like, for 99 you have unlimited sessions like that. So how do they manage it? Like,
Got
it's
it. Got
pretty
it.
costly if I think about it.
Very, very good question. I actually have like a segment dedicated to subscription pricing. Maybe it'll get answered there. If not, please ask me this again. I'll give you a short answer, Kshitija. It's always a better option to go with subscription and not like a one-time payment, because subscription inherently there's an incentive for people to keep coming back to you. Yearly subscription, monthly subscription doesn't matter. So like for example, Spotify has both options, right? And nothing is ever unlimited. If it's unlimited, what that means is that your maintenance costs and every other cost is not much. So if people pay, you give you the money once, you can give them lifetime access to this because you really don't have high costs on your end. So your profit margins are very high. Anybody offering anything for lifetime value, like pay once and you subscribe once and you can like take this for your entire lifetime, it means your costs are really low. So I'll talk about subscription pricing, but subscription pricing is like really solid. Like it always beats any other pricing model whenever you have the chance of doing that. So I'll talk in more details about the Kshitija. Sounds good?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Any questions? Himanshu, Akash, Ratsuk, are we good? Sagar, sab theek? Himanshu, are you still here? Haven't heard from you in a bit. You good?
Sir, actually, I want to ask, like, should we consider about KPIs when we charge things?
Should you consider about KPIs?
Yeah.
Did you say KPIs, Akash?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What do you mean? Should we consider KPIs?
Like that वो तो ultimately tell करता है कितना usage हो रहा है तो उसके हिसाब से charge करना.
देखो, तुम अपना प्राइसिंग इंक्रीज डिक्रीज नहीं कर सकते डिपेंडिंग ऑन कितना यूजेज हो रहा है. फॉर एग्जांपल, यू मे हैव 1,000 कस्टमर्स जिसमें से 200 पीपल आर नॉट यूजिंग इट. यू सडनली कांट अनाउंस फॉर देम कि आप सबके लिए मैं 50% डिस्काउंट नेक्स्ट मंथ का सब्सक्रिप्शन फी पे. यू कांट
नहीं,
डू दैट.
actually, like there's a number of check-ins per day is a kind of KPI for me, so I can charge like this much rupees for per check-in ऐसा.
Acha, that way, yeah, you can. But in that case, remember that you're going with a subscription model, right? In which case, user charge kare. AWS does, right? Like AWS does it on the basis of usage fee, right? So usage fee is a good option. Yes, it has to be tied to a KPI. But remember that we are talking about the bigger picture. कि तुम usage fee itself बहुत high रखोगे कि कम लोग use कर रहे हैं तो you will be able to meet whatever targets you set for yourself, या फिर तुम usage fee बहुत कम रखोगे ताकि you focus on high volume of sales in order to meet the target. समझा क्या आकाश?
Yes, sir.
Right? What kind of pricing model you take comes later, but first of all you got to understand the value of whatever it is. तुम उसको high price करोगे and low volume of sales पे focus करोगे, या low price करोगे and high volume of sales पे focus करोगे. The questions that you see right here is going to help you make that decision. समझा?
Yes, sir.
Make sense, Akash?
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's move on. Let's actually talk about startup finance, right? कि हम पैसा के बारे में हम सोचेंगे कैसे? Like how do we think about money, make projections and stuff like that? Now, I'm going to take a pretty simple example, but I just want to show you the factors you need to think when you're making projections and calculations. नहीं तो सब गलत आएगा. Then you will have the wrong idea about what your startup does, okay? So we're going to get into maths abhi. इसके बाद, so make sure you're paying attention. If you get stuck, if you don't understand something, stop me, I'll re-explain it to you, right? But we're going to get into a little bit of math. Now, इससे पहले कि हम जाए into doing the calculations, very important thing to understand is the difference between a cost and the difference between an expense. Can somebody tell me, do you know what the difference is between a cost and an expense? Can anybody tell me the difference between a cost and an expense? Take an attempt, guess karo, it's fine. What do you think is the difference between cost and expense? Anyone want to take an attempt? Ratsuk, try करना है. तुमने कुछ बोला नहीं अभी तक। Does anybody want to take an attempt? Okay. Let me explain it to you. What is the difference between a cost and an expense? So it sounds the same. Expense is monetary, cost is combined value. ये वाइवा का आंसर हो गया पता है हिमांशु, कहना क्या चाहते हो मतलब? What does that mean? I mean, cost is also monetary. पैसा से ही देते हैं ना हम. What do you mean, Himanshu?
कॉस्ट मतलब अगर हम कोई ह्यूमन वैल्यू उसमें ऐड कर रहे हैं या अदर चीजें,
जैसे कि टैक्सेस.
टैक्सेस तो फिर वो एक्सपेंसेस में ही आ गया.
अच्छा, okay. So let me give you a simpler answer, right? Cost is usually one time, expense is recurring. ठीक है? Cost is usually one time, like एक बार हुआ खत्म, you're done with it, and expense is a recurring खर्चा जो तुम्हारा आता है, like a recurring cost is an expense. So basically, all expenses are costs, but not all costs are expenses, right? Anything that is recurring जो तुम्हें बार बार करना पड़े, that's an expense. Now typically in a startup ना चार kind of expenses होते हैं, बहुत simple है. सबसे पहला is asset purchase. If there is something you need to keep buying, right, because you need that as a key resource, an asset, then it is an asset, then it becomes a kind of expense called an asset purchase. जैसे साहिल का startup, because he's making a device to purify air, and the device cannot work without the algae chlorella V. So he will have to keep purchasing this algae in order to manufacture more units of his product. So asset purchase is a kind of expense he's going to have continuously, right? दूसरा होता है capital expense. So capital expense is, let's say, the money you put in order to make something, and sometimes you'll have to keep putting in capital in order to get something out, right? So capital expenses are basically any money, any kind of cost that goes into your company or product before revenue comes in and balances it off, right? So जैसे कि सबसे यूजुअली हम बोलते हैं कि कैपिटल कितना चाहिए प्रोडक्ट बनाने के लिए, तो आप सर्वर स्पेस खरीदते हो, डोमेन नेम खरीदते हो, राइट? इफ दो तीन लोग को हायर करते हो बनाने के लिए, खुद का पॉकेट से पैसा डालते हो, तो वो फिर कैपिटल एक्सपेंस में आ जाता है, बिकॉज यू पुटिंग इन दैट मनी until you start getting in revenue, right? And sometimes you have to keep doing capital expenses even down the line for other stuff. So that's a capital expense. Operational expenses are things that you do on a regular or a frequent basis, right? जैसे कि salary is operational expense, rent is operational expense, commission you might have to give to other partners or stuff, operational expense. अगर payment gateway का पैसा कट रहा है, operational expense, right? Taxes, operational expense, right? So all of these things are recurring expenses that cost. So this is the cost that might happen on the end when it comes to delivering your product or service. So delivery cost, for example, for Uber, delivery cost is a cell phone, because a lot of times, especially in the very early days, Uber would give a cell phone along, like with their account to new drivers to incite them to sort of sign up. That's a cost. Sometimes the cost that you provide. So if you're running a thrift store on Instagram and someone makes an order and you have to get Blue Dart to deliver that order, then वो आपका delivery cost में आ जाता है, क्योंकि आपको पैसा देना पड़ेगा Blue Dart को, and फिर वो पैसा recover करना पड़ेगा from the sales revenue of that certain product, right? So there are four kinds of expenses. Just putting this out here, you guys need to know this before I start doing the calculations. Any questions? Do you understand what these are? Do you want me to re-explain
एक
any
बार
of them, or
सर
do you have any?
एसेट और कैपिटल में ये डिफरेंस क्या?
So asset होता है कि जब तुम कोई चीज खरीदते हो, ठीक है, physically you purchase something. So if you need to purchase, like मान लो you are a cloud kitchen and there are certain ingredients that you use in your, so let's say you run a pizza outlet, ठीक है, तुमको चीज खरीदते रहना पड़ेगा क्योंकि चीज बस पिज्जा, राइट? कैपिटल एक्सपेंस होता है or the money that you sort of invest that you द मनी जो आप अपने पॉकेट से डालते हो या फिर थोड़ा पैसा अलग करके डालते हो इन ऑर्डर टू क्रिएट अ न्यू प्रोडक्ट इज अ कैपिटल एक्सपेंस. इफ यू सडनली डिसाइड दैट यू नो व्हाट वी आर गोइंग टू कीप सम मनी असाइड बिकॉज हमारा सेल्स टीम तो बन गया लेकिन सेल्स टीम का ट्रेनिंग नहीं हुआ है अभी तक, तो आप क्या करते हो अपना रेवेन्यू से यू टेक आउट 10% ऑफ द रेवेन्यू, make it a budget, use it to train your sales team. Using that training, they'll be able to sell more products, and then ज़्यादा पैसे आएंगे तो आपका capital expense balance हो जाएगा, right? So that's a capital expense. Operational expense are the expenses you need to keep operations running day to day. जो सारी चीजें आते हैं उसमें salary, rent वगैरह वगैरह सब कुछ. Got it? Makes sense, Akash?
So we can say that capital expenses are now spent on product development, right?
Capital expenses can be are usually spent on the creation of something when there is nothing at all. Samjha, it's like an investment. Capital expense is more like an investment that you, so for example, if you take the cloud kitchen example, सर चीज वीज वो सब तो तुम खरीद लोगे, ठीक है, लेकिन तुमको थोड़ा पैसा अलग रखना है ताकि आप पूरा किचन कंस्ट्रक्ट कर पाओ, तो वो आपका कैपिटल एक्सपेंस में चला जाएगा. वो किचन क्रिएशन में यू नीड टू हायर स्टाफ, पे देयर सैलरी. सो कैपिटल एक्सपेंस के अंदर आ जाता है कि चलो इतना पैसा बजट में रखा, अभी इसमें से हमको सैलरी के लिए इतना देना पड़ेगा, सो ऑपरेशनल एक्सपेंस में सैलरी आ गया. हमें एक ओवन खरीदना है, राइट, सो टू बाय एन ओवन यू नीड टू स्पेंड सम मनी, तो वो आपका एसेट परचेस में चला गया बिकॉज वो वन टाइम होएगा वगैरह. सो ऐसे करके आप डिवाइड करते हो. बट कैपिटल एक्सपेंस इज द मेन बजट यू एलोकेट इन ऑर्डर टू क्रिएट समथिंग एकदम नया, जो फिर बाद में रेवेन्यू जब आएगा तो आप बैलेंस कर लोगे पूरा चीज. मेक सेंस आकाश? इज दैट
अभी तो
क्लियर?
नहीं कर रहा सेंस.
नहीं कर रहा है? एक काम करते हैं, लेट्स टॉक अबाउट इट एट द एंड ऑफ द सेशन अगेन, ठीक है? By the way, anybody else, any other questions? Are you stuck with something? Can we move forward? Can you let me know if we can move forward? All good, everybody? Can we move forward? Can you let me know if it's all good? Mansi, Shidija, Sagar, Ratsuk, Himanshu, all good? Can we move forward? Okay, awesome, awesome. Now, the सबसे important and सबसे easy चीज समझने का क्या है कि customers और आपके पास product units है, right? You're selling something and you have customers. Product units क्योंकि वो कुछ भी हो सकता है, number of units of actually the product sold, number of accounts, paid accounts, जो भी अपने हिसाब से आप define करते हो. सिंपल चीज समझने का ये है कि customers into number of product units sold is equal to revenue. बहुत ही simple, ठीक है? By the way, revenue and profit is not the same thing, right? Can anyone tell me the difference between revenue and profit? Like, I could be a company making $100 million in revenue a year, but I can still make zero profit.
So revenue or the profit is equal to revenue minus all the cost you have.
Okay, fair enough. Yes. Mansi, Shadija, someone was saying something else. Camellia, I don't know who it
Yeah,
is.
it must be going in the expenses.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, revenue minus expenses is equal to profit. ठीक है? So इसलिए revenue होता है because हमें expenses क्या है पता नहीं है अभी तक. But basic formula क्या है? Number of customers into number of units of products sold is equal to your revenue. ठीक है? हम एक example लेते हैं for me to explain this अच्छे से. मान लो कि तुम एक कंपनी हो जो ऑनलाइन प्रोग्राम्स बेचता है, ठीक है? यू आर अ कंपनी, फॉर एग्जांपल हिमांशु, ठीक है? यू आर अ कंपनी दैट मेक्स कोर्सेज एंड यू सेल कोर्सेज. एवरी यूनिट ऑफ द कोर्स हैज अ प्राइस. जितना कस्टमर्स को बेचे, एक एक कोर्स का एक एक प्राइस यूनिट है. लाइक दिस कोर्स इज 500 रुपीज, ये 600, ये 1000, 1500, जो भी, ठीक है? यूडेमी जैसा मान लो, ठीक है? एंड यू आर सेलिंग ऑनलाइन प्रोग्राम्स, लेट्स से. So in that case, customers into number of programs sold is going to be equal to your revenue, right? In this particular example of an online company. Now let's say all of us right now are running this online company. So let's brainstorm this together, ठीक है? हम सब ये कंपनी चला रहे हैं, ठीक है? मैं इंटर्न हूँ कंपनी में, आप लोग सब चला रहे हो. Now when we start doing some calculation, सबसे important दो सवाल हम पूछेंगे कि अच्छा एक साल में कितने कस्टमर्स हमारे हिसाब से हम कन्वर्ट कर सकते हैं, ठीक है? और हर कस्टमर को हम कितना प्रोग्राम बेच सकते हैं टू ईच ऑफ दोज कस्टमर्स, राइट? Now, let's say that you are a company that has created a very special course on, let's say, entrepreneurship, or a course on mental health, or a course on design thinking. कोर्स आपके पास एक दो ही है ऐसे, ठीक है? अभी आप सोचते हो कि कितने कस्टमर्स आइडियली, लाइक हमारा जो टीम का साइज है, लेट्स से वी आर 3 पीपल इन द टीम एंड 5 इंटर्न्स, राइट? एंड हमारे पास जितना पैसा है, जितना जो भी है, हम बूटस्ट्रैप्ड है कंप्लीटली, जितना स्किल्स, जितना रिसोर्सेज है, एक साल में हम कितने कस्टमर्स को बेच सकते हैं आइडियली स्पीकिंग, राइट? एंड हर कस्टमर को हम कितना प्रोग्राम बेच पाएंगे? सो लेट्स से दैट वी अज्यूम दैट in a year we can sell 1,000 customers, like 1,000 customers को convert कर सकते हैं, और हर कस्टमर को एक ही प्रोग्राम बेच सकते हैं, हमें लगता है, ठीक है? In that case, the number of programs sold in a year is going to be equal to 1,000 into 1,000, right? Which means that the number of programs that you should target to sell in a month is 1,000 divided by 12, which is 83.33. मतलब basically 83 programs you should be able to sell in a month in order to sell 1,000 programs in a year, right? About 83. What that means is, if on this month I sell only 40 programs, in the next month I will have to sell 83 plus 43, right? I will have to somehow make up for it. लेकिन मेरे को एक monthly target मिल गया कि भाई 1,000 प्रोग्राम अगर मेरे को बेचना है साल में, 83 प्रोग्राम्स तो महीने में बिकना चाहिए, 80 प्रोग्राम का टारगेट हो गया महीने का. Are we clear? All good. I'm going to take a feedback because it involves math. So all good so far. Everybody understands? Pretty simple. All good? Give me a thumbs up if it's good. Okay. Now, the next thing that you want to figure out once you know this is, how much would we spend on marketing for each customer? So what that means is, आप ये सोचते हो, and you get this from a little bit of experience, intuition, and also your research, and also once you've been on the field, you start asking yourself the question कि हमारा तो 1,000 customers a year, एक program per customer, so 1,000 programs. अब जो 1,000 customers है अपना, remember high volume, low sales, you can also say that each customer we can sell 2 of our unique programs. So in that case, your projections will become different in the previous slide, right? But in our case, 1,000 customers, 1 program each. Now you ask yourself the question, for each customer, how much money would we spend on marketing, right? So this could be, can come from experience of, let's say, if you spend $50 on Facebook to run an ad for a month, $50 में से $50 का ad में से, let's say, 2 customers converted and actually ended up buying the program, which means per customer your marketing cost is $25 if they come in simply from marketing. $50 spend करके 5 customers आए, एक एक customer पे आपने $10 spend किया, right, to get them. So you need to very objectively start thinking about how much are you spending on each customer in for marketing in order to get them. Now you might say that, you know what, I don't spend anything because I just have like a Instagram page or a Facebook page or a form or a website. जिसको आना है आ जाता है, ठीक है? In that case, you don't have a strategy, but you got to understand also, nothing is free. If you're not actually spending money, maybe you want to ask yourself the question, okay, um, who is actually making sure that we get more followers? Maybe you have 5 interns working for you, ठीक है? 5 interns अपना activity से हर महीना आपके लिए 2 customer ला रहे हैं. Then you got to start asking the question, if these 5 interns were paid employees and I had 2 paid employees who would be able to get me 5 customers in a month, how much would be the salary of those employees, and how many hours a day do you think this employee, or how many hours a month do you think this employee can chase behind closing 1 customer or 5 customers or 10 customers or 15 customers? Divided by that number, you will get the cost on each customer. So you have to know this. This cannot be zero. This is never zero. Nothing is for free, right? And I will subjectively talk about how to calculate this cost for each of your companies. But there will be a cost of marketing. There always is, even if you don't see it. Now, लेट्स से दैट हम बोलते हैं कि यार हमारा टोटल सब कुछ मिला के लग रहा है कि हर कस्टमर पे 100 रुपए लगता है, लाइक फॉर ईच कन्वर्टेड कस्टमर्स वी विल बी स्पेंडिंग अबाउट 100 रुपीज इन मार्केटिंग फॉर ईच ऑफ दैम. टोटल कस्टमर्स अपना साल का 1,000 है, हमको पता है, विच मीन्स दैट योर ग्रॉस marketing cost, right? Your gross marketing cost is a term, it's a technical term, is basically 100 into 1,000, which is 1 lakh. तो आपको पता है that in order to get to 1 lakh customers in your year, 1,00,000 रुपए आपका जाने वाला है इन मार्केटिंग एक पूरा साल में. 1,00,000 rupees is your marketing budget, ठीक है, is what we get. So in the sorry, in the previous slide, we know what our monthly target was. We know how much we're selling. In this slide, we know what is our gross marketing, your budget, right? Your gross marketing cost. All good so far? Can you give me a thumbs up? Do you understand? Clear? Sabke liye clear? All good? Give me a thumbs up, guys, if it's good. Okay. Thanks, Mansi. Now, here is the most interesting part. After doing all of that calculation, अब अपने पास सवाल आता है कि हम MRP कैसे कैलकुलेट करेंगे, which means अपना each program जो हम बेच रहे हैं उसका प्राइस कैसे कैलकुलेट करेंगे, right? Now let's say that we decide that our program MRP, for example, we say that it is going to be 1,000 rupees. Okay, sorry, it's going to be 3,000 rupees, let's say. हम बोलते हैं कि यार हम ना 3,000 पर प्रोग्राम बेचेंगे. Once you know what the MRP is, a very important question to ask yourself is what percentage of that MRP is going to cover your variable cost, which means अगर आप हर प्रोग्राम 3,000 रुपए में बेच रहे हो और हर प्रोग्राम क्रिएट करने के लिए भी कुछ एक्सपेंसेस है, जैसे कि कंटेंट का एक्सपेंसेस, आप कोई टूल यूज कर रहे हो जिसका आपको हर महीना पैसा देना पड़ रहा है, लाइक कैनवा प्रोफेशनल एडिशन और व्हाटएवर, लाइक यू हैव अ Adobe license that you're paying for, right? Or maybe you actually paid money to a freelance content designer to make the videos for that course, right? क्योंकि आपका टीम वो नहीं हैंडल कर सकता है. So बहुत सारे वेरिएबल कॉस्ट हैं. 3,000 रुपए में से कितना आप एलोकेट करोगे बजट कि इतना परसेंटेज में से वो वेरिएबल कॉस्ट निकल जाना चाहिए पर प्रोग्राम, विच मीन्स एक प्रोग्राम बनाने के लिए अगर आपने खर्चा किया 5 लाख रुपए, फॉर एग्जाम्पल, दैट्स टू मच. प्लीज डोंट स्पेंड. इफ यू आर स्पेंडिंग सो मच मनी ऑन समथिंग, there's something really wrong. But if in edtech, ठीक है, in India, so if you spend 5 lakh per program and आप 3,000 पे बेच रहे हो and you know that you'll be selling it to 1,000 customers, so you'll be able to know that अगर 5 लाख मेरा कॉस्ट है 3,000 पे बेचेंगे तो कितना परसेंटेज में से अपना वो 5 लाख निकल जाएगा. दैट बिकम्स द परसेंटेज. नाउ लेट्स से in our case, for example, we say that 20% of the MRP is going to cover for our variable cost. 20% of the MRP में से सारा वेरिएबल कॉस्ट निकल जाएगा वो प्रोग्राम बनाने का. इन दैट केस व्हाट हैपेंस इज देयर समथिंग कॉल्ड अ कंट्रीब्यूशन मार्जिन. ठीक है, कंट्रीब्यूशन मार्जिन का क्या मतलब होता है? आपका जो भी प्राइस है वो प्राइस में से एक्चुअली कितना परसेंट कंट्रीब्यूट कर रहा है टू योर रेवेन्यू, हाउ मच ऑफ इट इज रियली कंट्रीब्यूटिंग टू योर रेवेन्यू फ्रॉम वट एवर यूर प्राइसिंग इट एट. ठीक है, अभी तक हमने टैक्सेस नहीं लगाया इसलिए मैंने बोला रेवेन्यू नॉट प्रॉफिट. तो कंट्रीब्यूशन मार्जिन इज उस प्रोडक्ट इटसेल्फ को बनाने के लिए वेरिएबल कॉस्ट अब अगर आप हटा दोगे तो जितना भी बचता है पैसा वो कंट्रीब्यूट कर रहा है अपने रेवेन्यू को, नॉट 3,000 रुपए. इन आवर केस it is going to be 3,000 minus 20% of 3,000, which means for every program that you sell, for every course that you sell on this online platform that you have, you will be making 2,400 as your contribution margin that actually contributes to your revenue because बाकी सब तो variable cost को cover करने में निकल जाएगा. Got it? Makes sense so far? Yeah. So we learned the concept of कैसे calculate होता है revenue. हमने सोचा कितने कस्टमर हो सकता है, कितने कोर्सेज बेचेंगे हम एक कस्टमर को, मंथली टारगेट निकल के आ गया 83. अब हमको पता है कि मार्केटिंग कॉस्ट कितना हम स्पेंड करेंगे, सो एक ग्रॉस मार्केटिंग कॉस्ट भी निकल गया अपना. एंड नाउ वी नो आवर प्रोग्राम MRP एंड वी नो आवर कंट्रीब्यूशन मार्जिन. नाउ हियर इज व्हेन इट ऑल कम्स टुगेदर. ठीक है, दिस इज द फाइनल आउटकम ऑफ दिस. हमें पता है दैट प्रॉफिट इज इक्वल टू रेवेन्यू माइनस एक्सपेंसेस, राइट? नाउ इफ यू वांट टू कैलकुलेट द नेट प्रॉफिट मार्जिन, लोग बात करते हैं ना प्रॉफिट मार्जिन क्या है भाई, तेरा प्रॉफिट मार्जिन कितना है, इतना परसेंट प्रॉफिट मार्जिन है. सो व्हाट द हेल डज दैट मीन, राइट? आई टोल्ड यू आई हेट jargons because it doesn't mean anything until you understand it. अगर हम ये सिंपल फॉर्मूला लें ना, रेवेन्यू माइनस एक्सपेंसेस, अगर हमें नेट प्रॉफिट मार्जिन कैलकुलेट करना है, हियर इज व्हाट इट मींस. द नेट प्रॉफिट मार्जिन इज इक्वल टू योर ग्रॉस कंट्रीब्यूशन मार्जिन. ठीक है, जो हमने यहाँ कैलकुलेट किया राइट हियर, राइट? इन आवर केस इट इज 2,400, right? अगर हम 3,000 is our let's say 2,400 is our contribution margin per course, and if we end up selling 1,000 units of that course, then gross contribution margin becomes 2,400 into 1,000. Gross मतलब total basically, that's it. ठीक है? So gross contribution margin minus your technology maintenance cost. तो मान लो कि तुम्हारा कोई सर्वर है, ठीक है, कोई तुम थर्ड पार्टी ऐप यूज कर रहे हो, राइट? maybe you have other stuff, you have a tech team partnership, जो भी तुम्हारा technology maintenance का जो भी cost होगा उसको subtract करो. For your case, in case of product company, you also subtract your gross marketing cost, which means how much will it take to market that. You also subtract taxes, okay, and you also subtract any other expenses you may have, right, related to the product itself. That, when you calculate it year on year, becomes your net profit margin for each year. Got it? I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to show you how powerful this is and आप कैसे actually plot करके सब कुछ देख सकते हो. But do you understand this so far? Your net profit margin is equal to your gross contribution margin, which means in our case 2400 per course multiplied by number of courses in a year, so 2400 into 1000, minus टेक्नोलॉजी मेंटेनेंस कॉस्ट, क्योंकि कोर्स बनाने के लिए आपको कुछ लेना पड़ेगा, सर्वर वर्वर जो भी है आपका, माइनस ग्रॉस मार्केटिंग कॉस्ट, वो 1000 यूनिट्स ऑफ कोर्स स्पेंड, सॉरी 1000 यूनिट्स ऑफ कोर्स बेचने के लिए कितना मार्केटिंग होएगा. इन आवर केस वी सॉ इट वाज 1 lakh rupees, minus taxes that you might have to pay for doing all of this. So Razor पे अगर आप कोई यूज करते हो पेमेंट गेटवे, वहां पे टैक्सेस होता है, जीएसटी देना पड़ता है, वगैरह वगैरह. And also any other expenses you may have related to that 1000 units of courses you're selling in our case, right? Got it? Any questions? Okay, so Mansi, gross contribution margin is हमने एक प्रोडक्ट का कंट्रीब्यूशन मार्जिन यहाँ पे कैलकुलेट किया. सो कंट्रीब्यूशन मार्जिन इज आपका प्राइस में से कितना परसेंट actually helps contribute to your revenue. The entire 3000 रुपए रेवेन्यू में नहीं आने वाला है, उसमें से वेरिएबल कॉस्ट का थोड़ा खर्चा निकालना पड़ेगा, राइट? सो हर कोर्स के लिए your contribution margin is the price of the course minus 20% of the price. So which means 2400 per course you sell, you will be able to actually reflect in your revenue. So if our target is
variable cost
selling,
examples.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So if you sell 1000 units of a course in a year, so your gross contribution margin is going to be equal to 2400 minus 2400 multiplied by 1000, because gross is total. So एक course का contribution margin is 2400, multiply it by the total number of courses you sell, and that becomes your gross contribution margin. Got it?
I have a
Mansi?
question here. So if we take commission, if our model is on a commission basis,
Yeah.
so will we just take a gross contribution margin as?
So you actually convert your commission into a number, right? So in your case, so you take your calculation is going to be basically percentage based. So if you say that we are going to take 5% commission on every transaction, your question then should be what percentage of 5% is going to actually cover for variable cost. So you say कि 5% commission का 1% will actually be used to cover your variable costs. In that case, your contribution margin per transaction becomes 4% and not 5, because 5 में से 1% will be used to cover for variable costs per transaction.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah, but variable costs क्या होंगे? And
So variable costs are actually calculated like per unit of the product or service, right? So मैं तुमको दिखाता हूँ in a bit what variable costs are, but in our example, because we are taking the example of an online platform that sells courses, your variable cost could be like the cost of making that course, right? तो आप एक कोर्स बनाने के लिए आपने 5 लाख रुपए खर्चा किया, अभी आप एक साल में 1000 यूनिट्स ऑफ द कोर्स बेचने वाले हो for 3000 rupees each, which means you are going to be making 30 lakh rupees. तो आपको पता है कि 30 लाख अगर हम बना रहे हैं एंड 5 लाख अगर उसमें से अपना वेरिएबल कॉस्ट है, तो हर यूनिट में से कितना परसेंट अगर हम निकालेंगे वेरिएबल कॉस्ट के लिए, तो 30 लाख में से पूरा वेरिएबल कॉस्ट निकल जाएगा. दैट्स हाउ यू कैलकुलेट इट. सो इट्स वेरी सब्जेक्टिव, मानसी. In your case, a variable cost per transaction could be, for example, if you're using Calendly Pro in order to handle like calendar bookings and stuff like that, you will have to take your yearly kharcha of maintaining something like Calendly Pro, and maybe you actually build it into the transaction and not separately as a technology maintenance cost, because उसके लिए use होता है. या फिर अगर the transaction involves something like Razorpay and जहाँ पे थोड़ा commission Razorpay काट रहा है, तो वो भी आपका variable cost में आने वाला है. Stuff like that. So it's very subjective to whatever is your product or your service, and उसके हिसाब से आप सोचते हो कि per unit variable cost क्या है. Like for doing every unit of the sales, for example, you may have a setup cost, like थोड़ा खर्चा जाता है इसको सेटअप करने के लिए, कोई हायर करना पड़ेगा, उसको दिन का 50 रुपए देना पड़ेगा करने के लिए, फिर वो हो जाता है ऐसा. Got it? So specifically what it means for you, Mansi, what is your variable cost? I will address this on Friday. But do you understand what variable costs are in general in this case?
Yeah,
Per
now I
product.
do.
Yeah? Okay. Now, to take an example, but before we do that, I'm going to move to an example right now. Same, इसी का मैं numbers plot करके तुमको example दिखाऊंगा. But any questions so far? Anybody? Do you understand this formula? Because this is the formula that is going to become key. हम अपना ग्रॉस कंट्रीब्यूशन मार्जिन लेते हैं, सब्ट्रैक्ट करते हैं, ये सारे चीजें, आपको नेट प्रॉफिट मार्जिन मिल जाएगा ईयर ऑन ईयर. आपने सुना है कभी लोग बोलते हैं कि कैन यू शो मी योर 3-year फाइनेंशियल प्रोजेक्शन? हैव यू हर्ड दिस? आई विल शो यू एक्चुअली हाउ यू कैन मेक अ वेरी सिंपल वर्जन ऑफ अ 3-year प्रोजेक्शन. बट एनी क्वेश्चन सो फार? गॉट इट? ये फॉर्मूला याद रखना, इसका स्क्रीनशॉट ले लो, नहीं तो तुमको नेक्स्ट चीज समझ में नहीं आएगा. गॉट इट एवरीबॉडी? ठीक है, क्विक रिकैप. कस्टमर्स इन अ ईयर, कितने प्रोग्राम बेचोगे, आपका मंथली टारगेट बन गया था, मार्केटिंग कॉस्ट पर कस्टमर, आपका ग्रॉस मार्केटिंग कॉस्ट बन गया यहाँ पे. ठीक है, उसके बाद एमआरपी क्या है, उसमें से कितना परसेंट वेरिएबल कॉस्ट का खर्चा निकालने में जाएगा. सो आपको एक कंट्रीब्यूशन मार्जिन मिल जाता है पर कोर्स इन आर केस. फिर आप प्रॉफिट कैलकुलेट करते हो, रेवेन्यू माइनस एक्सपेंस. सो नेट प्रॉफिट मार्जिन हो जाएगा या ग्रॉस कंट्रीब्यूशन मार्जिन. ठीक है, फॉर ऑल द प्रोडक्ट सोल्ड माइनस technology maintenance cost minus gross marketing cost minus taxes and minus any other expenses. Okay, year on year. Now let me show you what this looks like. So right here. So here is very simply how you can make this work. You guys can see my screen, right? You see the spreadsheet in front of me. See it? Everyone? Visible? Yeah? Okay. Now, what you do is आप year 1, year 2, year 3 लगा सकते हो. ठीक है, देखो वेरी सिंपल. क्या करना है ना, एक स्प्रेडशीट लेना ना, ये फॉर्मूला डाल देना वहां पर. ठीक है, जैसे कि यहाँ पे मैंने देखो ऊपर फॉर्मूला डाल दिया कि B5 माइनस B12, दिस मल्टीप्लाइड बाय दिस इज इक्वल टू B5. ठीक है, एंड फिर इसको डिवाइडेड बाय 12 अपना है 83.33. ऐसे वो सारे फॉर्मूला मैंने स्प्रेडशीट में डाल दिया. ठीक है, आई विल टेल यू व्हाई आई डिड दिस. सो नंबर ऑफ कस्टमर्स पर ईयर 1000, यूनिट सोल्ड पर कस्टमर 1, टोटल यूनिट सोल्ड टारगेट है यूनिट सोल्ड पर मंथ 83.3. ठीक है, एक्सपेंसेस में मार्केटिंग कॉस्ट पर कस्टमर पर मंथ 100 रुपए, ग्रॉस मार्केटिंग कॉस्ट पर ईयर 1 लाख रुपए. एक्चुअली ये पर मंथ नहीं होगा, राइट है. ठीक है, साल का 1 लाख. ये कैसे आ रहा है? नंबर ऑफ कस्टमर्स इन अ ईयर मल्टीप्लाइड बाय द मार्केटिंग कॉस्ट पर कस्टमर. ठीक है, उसके बाद आता है यूनिट प्राइसिंग पे. अपना एमआरपी कितना है? 3000. Variable cost percent, which means 20% of this is going to be used to cover for variable costs. So gross contribution margin is 3000 minus 20% of 3000, which is equal to 2400. ठीक है, अब हम revenue कैसे calculate करते हैं? If you are selling 1000 units, the amount of money that we are going to be making on the unit sold is equal to unit MRP into unit sold, which means 3000 रुपए में अगर हम बेच रहे हैं into 1000 units, you are going to be making this much money right here, 30 lakhs. ठीक है, contribution margin इसका कितना होता है at 20%? 24 lakhs. You will not be making lakhs, you will make 24 lakhs. उसमें से मान लो टेक्नोलॉजी मेंटेनेंस कॉस्ट तुम्हारा इतना है. ठीक है, ग्रॉस मार्केटिंग कॉस्ट उसमें से तुम्हारा 1 लाख है, 18% आप जीएसटी देते हो. दिस इज द अमाउंट ऑफ मनी यू विल मेक इन अ ईयर. इट्स दैट सेम फॉर्मूला, subtract everything, you get it here. Here is why it is powerful. When you put everything in a sheet in front of you, you know what, you can say that what if I sell my course instead of at 3000 rupees, what if I sell it at 5000 rupees? Okay, when you change this now, you see all the numbers also change, right? It actually changed. So if I change this from 20%, if I say that actually 10%, see the number here changes as well, right? So this is why this is powerful, because you can just put it in a spreadsheet, plot करो, फॉर्मूला लगाओ, आपको सब मिल जाएगा. अगर मैंने मान लो इसको 3000 ही रखा जैसा अपना था पहले. ठीक है, I put it as 3000 only and I put this as 20% what it was before. ठीक है, and I tell myself that you know what, 1000 यूनिट्स पर ईयर तो बहुत ज्यादा हो जाएगा भाई, हम बस 500 customers को ही convert कर सकते हैं. So if I change this to 500, my monthly target changes to 41, right? My gross marketing cost is also reduced, and you will be able to see that my final net profit margin here is also reducing, right? Instead of that, if I say that I'm going to sell it to, let's say, 30,000 customers a year, बहुत बड़ा company है, right? In that case, 2,500 units per month will become your target, and you see how your net profit margin also changes. So it's very simple for you to do this. Just put everything into a spreadsheet, use the formula that I gave you. It allows you to calculate really quickly what your margins look like year on year. And जैसे आप ज़्यादा एडवांस होते जाते हो, अब नए नए चीज़ें डालते जाओगे, यहाँ पे नए एक्सपेंसेस आएंगे या फिर other stuff that you figure out. So it just allows you to have a very solid framework to use for, क्योंकि इससे आपको पता चल जाता है कि आपका टारगेट क्या है, कितना आपको कमाना पड़ेगा, सब कुछ दिख रहा है आपको. 83 आपको यूनिट्स बेचना है एक महीने में, नहीं हो सकता है अगर, तो आप अपने हिसाब से देख लो. इन दैट केस मे बी यू एक्चुअली वांट टू हैव 2 units sold per customer, right? So then it changes accordingly. So that's how you want to make this work. Make sense, everybody? आया समझ कैसे हम प्लॉट करते हैं, how this works, everyone? Akash, does this answer your question? Yeah. So मैं काम करता हूँ, मैं इस टेम्पलेट का एक कॉपी बना के ना, आई विल अपलोड इट इन योर ड्राइव फोल्डर बाय फ्राइडे. ठीक है, तो आपके पास एक कॉपी रहेगा. ये कॉपी को लो, इसमें फॉर्मूला डाला हुआ है, आप इसको एडिट कर सकते हो, आप अपना वर्जन बना सकते हो, आप कुछ भी कर सकते हो. ठीक है, ओपन सोर्स है, डोंट वरी अबाउट इट. आई विल जस्ट पुट इन सम डमी नंबर्स, लाइक दीज वंस आर डमी नंबर्स. ठीक है, फिर उसके बाद आप चेंज करो, आप अपने हिसाब से लगाओ. The more you do this, the better sense it will make, the more you'll be able to have control over your finances. And this is how you realize, मतलब ये सब कुछ करके आपको लग सकता है कि यार इतना ही पैसा बना रहे हैं, इसमें से तो बाकी सब कुछ निकलेगा नहीं. So then you'll have to say, you know what, if we can't do anything about the variable cost, अगर हम कुछ कर नहीं सकते because we have to get the course made by someone else, क्योंकि हमारे पास तो है नहीं skills. In that case, maybe you increase your product MRP to increase that, right? और या फिर आप बोल सकते हो कि एक काम करते हैं भाई, हम इंटरनली बनाते हैं, अपने से जो होता है वेरिएबल कॉस्ट हटाओ सब, इसको हम 5% पे ले आएंगे, तो आपका फिर भी ये इंक्रीज हो जाएगा. That's how you make strategies and decisions based on actual numbers. Sorry. Got it? कोई सवाल किसी का? This is how financial projections are made.
सर ये ईयर 2 और ईयर 3 का जैसे आपने तो सोच रखा है ऐसा होगा, तो सोचना इन एक्सेल शीट इज नॉट डिफरेंट ना.
हाँ, सो देखो, जब आप क्या करते हो ना, देखो सबसे पहला बात ना आकाश, कोई तुमको लाइफ में नहीं बता सकता कि आपका स्टार्टअप के साथ कोई, तो कोई है ही नहीं ऐसा, तुम भी नहीं बता सकते हो एक्चुअली. सो तुम प्रोजेक्शंस करते हो, तुम बोलते हो कि यार अगर हम कुछ भी नहीं चेंज किए, अगर हम इतना ही किए तो हम इतना बनाएंगे. या फिर आप बोलते हो, यू नो व्हाट, ईयर 2 से हम क्या करेंगे, बिकॉज अपना मार्केटिंग टीम थोड़ा बड़ा हो जाएगा. सो ऑन ईयर 2 वी विल नॉट सेल 1000 यूनिट्स, वी विल ट्राई टू सेल 5000 यूनिट्स ऑफ इट. तो आपको दिखता है कि ईयर 2 में आपका इतना होएगा फिर. So that is how you make projections. When you actually run your company, like for real, you will be able to see कि actually में क्या हो रहा है. तुम बोलते हो कि यार year 3 में काम करेंगे, sorry, year 3 में because we'll be an even bigger company, हम 8000 यूनिट्स बेचेंगे. ठीक है, so उस हिसाब से तुम्हारा year 3 का भी चेंज हो जाएगा, तुमको टोटल 3 साल में कितना हो रहा है तुमको वो भी दिख जाएगा. अब देखो, हो सकता है कि ईयर 2 में कोविड-19 आ गया, तो तुम्हारे ये प्रोजेक्शंस विल गो आउट ऑफ द विंडो. देन यू विल हैव टू कम बैक एंड यू विल बी लाइक, ओके अभी चलो, अब क्या कर सकते हैं, स्ट्रैटेजी निकालो. अभी डज दिस वर्क, डू वी हैव टू सेल लेस यूनिट्स, डू आई हैव टू फायर माय सेल्स टीम बिकॉज unfortunately fire them because I don't have the money to run this, do I go lean, do I sell less units of the course. तो आपको फिर calculate करना पड़ता है. So this gives you a good head start. It gives you a starting point, a project. It's called a projection because it's like a prediction. It's like अगर हमने ये सारे चीजें किया, all other constants, everything else is a constant, तो हम इतना पैसा बनाएंगे. अब इसमें से कुछ ऊंच नीच हो सकता है, यहाँ पे ज्यादा खर्चा हो गया, वहां पे कम हो गया, वगैरह वगैरह. तो आप साल के एंड में वापस आते हो, आप देखते हो कि एक्चुअली में कितना खर्चा हुआ था, व्हाट लेसन्स डिड वी लर्न, इज दिस प्राइसिंग मॉडल वर्किंग, वगैरह वगैरह. अकॉर्डिंगली यू अपडेट योर स्ट्रेटेजी फॉर ईयर 2 एंड देन यू गेट इनटू ईयर 2. समझा आकाश?
हाँ, एक और चीज थी, जैसे कि लोग बोलते हैं कि जितना मतलब मैंने ये सब शीट उनसे रिव्यू लिया कि दे शुड बी लाइक 3 टाइम्स ग्रोथ पर ईयर और 1.5 टाइम्स ग्रोथ. पर ऐसा कहना तो मतलब बहुत वो वीक हो गया ना, जैसे कि
सो देखो, ईयर ऑन ईयर ग्रोथ कितना होता है ना, इसका कोई देयर इज नो मैजिक नंबर, ठीक है। तुमको कितना ईयर ऑन ईयर ग्रोथ चाहिए तुम पे है। नाउ ईयर ऑन ईयर ग्रोथ और ये सब फंडा एक्चुअली जब आप ऑफिशियली फंडिंग रेज करते हो, लाइक व्हेन यू गो टू अ वेंचर कैपिटलिस्ट या फिर लाइक व्हेन यू गो टू एन इन्वेस्टर, वो आपको ना ड्यू डिलिजेंस बोल के एक प्रोसेस होता है। सो ड्यू डिलिजेंस में दे एक्चुअली आस्क यू फॉर योर पीएनएल शीट्स, दे आस्क यू फॉर स्टफ लाइक दिस। तो वो बोलते हैं कि अपना अगर इफ यू हैव बीन ऑपरेशनल फॉर द लास्ट 4 years, आप अपना पिछला 4 साल का पूरा प्रॉफिट एंड लॉस स्टेटमेंट शीट दिखाओ। सो मेक श्योर यू मेंटेन दीज थिंग्स, ठीक है। हर साल का खर्चा कितना, प्रॉफिट कितना, कितना यूनिट्स बेचे, कहाँ पे मार्केटिंग का पैसा डूब गया, आपको मेंटेन करना पड़ेगा। वो सब देख के आप बोल सकते हो कि देखो हियर इज अ प्रॉफिट एंड लॉस स्टेटमेंट फॉर द लास्ट 4 years, वी हैव बीन डूइंग एन एवरेज 12% ईयर ऑन ईयर ग्रोथ ऑन आर नेट प्रॉफिट मार्जिन। तो फिर अपना इन्वेस्टर सोचेगा कि चलो सही है, ये लोग अच्छा है, इन लोग का ईयर ऑन ईयर ग्रोथ सही जा रहा है। मतलब अगर मैंने और थोड़ा पैसा दिया, फिर वो पूछेगा कि तुम पैसा कहाँ कहाँ लगाओगे, क्यों लगाओगे, आंसर देना। जब वो सब हो जाता है तो देन दे विल लाइक चलो अगर मैंने पैसा दे दिया, आई कैन इंक्रीज दिस probably this team's growth from 12% to 26%, तो मेरा इतना फायदा होगा। ये सब कैलकुलेशन करके इन्वेस्टर बोलेगा चलो आई विल गिव यू मनी। बट उसका भी बहुत कंडीशंस होता है, विच not enough time to cover today. I will cover this maybe in the starting of the next day's session, but that's how they decide. But suno, investor ke paas is the last thing that you should do. If you can bootstrap your company, nothing like it. Investor is literally the last option. Make sense, Akash? Okay, awesome. Everybody else, are we good? I'll be ending in exactly 5 minutes, 6 minutes. Are we good? All good? Okay. Now, coming back to this. This is the last thing and then we are done, okay? So जब हम बात कर रहे हैं ना स्टार्टअप फाइनेंस का, ठीक है, सो हियर आर सम टिप्स। अभी आप ये यूज करके अपना मॉडल बनाना, बट हियर आर सम टिप्स जस्ट टू हेल्प यू अंडरस्टैंड सम थिंकिंग स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट्स, ठीक है। सबसे पहला चीज याद रखना, अगर आपका स्टार्टअप 0 पैसा कमाता है तो आपके पास स्टार्टअप नहीं है, आप एक हॉबी प्रोजेक्ट चला रहे हो। इट्स वेरी हार्श टू हियर दिस, इट फील्स रियली बैड, बट यू नीड टू गिव योरसेल्फ अ टाइम फ्रेम, ठीक है, नहीं तो कभी सॉल्व नहीं होएगा ये। यू नीड टू पुट अ हार्ड स्टॉप एंड टेल योरसेल्फ कि I'll give myself 6 months। 6 months में इतना पैसा अगर आता है, आई एम गोइंग टू फील गुड। लेकिन 6 महीने बाद अगर आपका जीरो का जीरो रहता है रेवेन्यू, इफ यू आर नॉट मेकिंग एनी मनी, फिर आपके पास एक हॉबी प्रोजेक्ट है। फिर स्टार्टअप मत बोलना, ज्यादा प्रेशर मत लेना, चिल करना। हॉबी जब होएगा पैसा होएगा, नहीं होएगा नहीं होएगा, कोई टेंशन नहीं है। अनलेस you have positive revenue, unless it's greater than zero, you don't have a startup, you have a hobby project, ठीक है। अगर आपने अभी तक पैसा नहीं कमाया अपने स्टार्टअप से, यू आर रनिंग अ हॉबी प्रोजेक्ट, यू आर नॉट रनिंग अ कंपनी। वेरी हार्श बट एब्सोल्यूट ट्रूथ, ठीक है। सेकेंड थिंग, प्राइसिंग मॉडल बनाते हो कि वुड यू बी विलिंग टू पे फॉर योर ओन प्रोडक्ट। मान लो कि आप बोलते हो कि मैं एक सर्विस बेच रहा हूँ, 3000 रुपीज पर मंथ इज हाउ मच आई विल चार्ज। एक काम करना, 6 months के लिए ना 3000 rupees per month spend करना on your own product. Don't take it back. Consider it to be capital investment that you're doing in your startup. Spend the money, take your own product or service, see how it feels. आपको कैसा feel होता है कि is it worth 3000? Or do you feel कि ये क्या बकवास? It's very difficult. You're going to feel so much pain when you do this. I'm not even kidding. So I mean, whatever you guys decide to do, just do this yourself. Pay money to your own company, ठीक है? Whatever you decide is the pricing point. अपना ही product या service खुद ही लो, maybe without telling your team that it's you who's doing it. Whatever you want to figure out the way to do that. See how it feels to actually take your own product or service and pay that money. It's going to help you learn a lot about the real experience your customers are going to have. ठीक है? Important for you to understand that. Remember that subscription is always greater than asset sale. Asset sale मतलब एक बार बेच दिया खत्म हो गया बात। Subscription is better because you don't need to keep um, returning. देखो, when you're trying to sell something ना, you're trying to convince a customer to change his mind about buying something. लेकिन आप जब subscription करते हो ना, it's not on you. Then the customer has to decide if the person does not want to pay for something anymore. Right? It is a much powerful and a better position to be in, because usually when people subscribe to something, they keep coming back. If you don't make a mistake or mess up yourself, if your service is good, your product is good, they'll keep coming back. and you don't have to worry about it. This is the reason why when something like Netflix offers you a subscription service, unko pata hai that maybe you will not watch anything for 2 months, but you will still be paid by that. Like Netflix will still get paid by you for 2 months because you just took a subscription. So subscription is always better. Whenever possible, a subscription model is pretty awesome, right? It ensures retention and repeat customers. So always go for that. Here's a tip: please don't be afraid to charge money. In fact, बहुत early charge करना, ठीक है? डरना मत कभी, ये मत सोचना कि छोटा कंपनी है पैसा नहीं दिया तो क्या. If you're really afraid of that, you'll never be able to validate your startup. So don't be afraid to charge money. बहुत स्टार्टिंग से ही पैसा चार्ज करना चालू करना, ठीक है? From very very early days. Test what people are willing to pay for. So for example, if you have a new product or service, so a lot of companies do this. जैसे आप click करते हैं ना, वो बोलता है कि hey, we are not ready yet, but let us add you to the wait list so that the moment we launch, you're the first person to know. तो आप ऐसे collect करोगे ना feedback, आपको पता रहेगा that these are some of the things for which people are willing to pay money. Sometimes people sign up on a wait list, like early users, like early bird pricing. Like we are launching on uh, we are launching on July 15th, but if you buy it right now, 50% off आपको अभी मिल जाएगा. So you get solid validation that even though they're waiting on July 15th for them to launch, right now they're willing to give you the money. So that helps you test what people are willing to pay for. Okay? Pay to unlock premium features is pretty awesome. So कुछ features को आप premium रखते हो if you're especially offering like a software as a service company. And to unlock those premium features, they pay. For everything else, it's free. Offering things with a freemium model, and this I will talk about subjectively because to some of you it may be applicable. A freemium model is very powerful because once people see the value in what you're providing, they will most likely end up purchasing like the paid version of it, right? So biggest example of who does this is like companies like Spotify, right? So it's amazing if you can really go with a freemium model and like pay to unlock premium features. Also, when you're creating financial models, please anticipate or build for future trends. ठीक है? In order to know what future trends are, present में ना आपको बहुत नए चीजें करना पड़ेगा. You will have to meet new people, do new things, like just understand how the world works. Apart from business, apart from computer science, apart from all this, you really have to understand how the world works. You have to understand politics. You have to understand like history. You have to understand cultures, communities. You have to, नहीं तो आपको नहीं दिखेगा. For example, a trend that is really taking shape is that vehicle and house ownership has decreased in the last 10 years. Like 10-15 साल पहले जितने लोग घर खरीदते थे गाड़ी खरीदते थे, especially अभी लोग उतना गाड़ी नहीं खरीदते हैं, which is why the number of people who actually learn driving and the age at which they learn driving has also been changed, because now because of things like Uber and how easy it is for you to like get an app or like an on-demand like a vehicle to get you from point A to B. The ownership of vehicles ka rate has decreased. House ownership ka rate has decreased, right? Stuff like that. So the average number of years, very unfortunate, but the average number of years a marriage lasts has been decreasing over the last like few years. So stuff like that. So just things that are happening in the world, why it's happening, what kind of governments are coming, why they're coming, economic models kaise shift hota hai, what is the history of a place, what can we learn from a demographic and what has happened in the past. सारे चीजें से तुम anticipate and build कर सकते हो कि future में possibly क्या होने वाला है, right? Like for example, the fact that people would end up purchasing things from a thrift back in the past when retro trends were coming back in fashion and the whole thing of sustainability and all of these things took grasp, and which is why young people now like a lot of people even in my circle like we do purchase from thrift stores, and even younger generations like you guys, it's very popular. But you can anticipate these trends if you know what's happening in the world around you. Okay, so you got to try doing new things. That's how you learn. And the last thing, I remember someone had said this once about ads, right? कि हम ad डाल देंगे, Google ads वगैरह. But please एक बात समझ लो, ठीक है? Ads are dead. None of us, even on this call, we hate using products or services that have ads in them. Like I personally hate it. Ad वाला model बहुत पुराना है, वो काम नहीं करता है अभी और, ठीक है? So don't fall for ad revenue. Don't say that. Try to avoid basically going in with the ad revenue model. But if you can't avoid and you have to take that route, you should actually opt for native ads, okay, and not something like Google ads. So native ads kya hota hai? Non-intrusive hota hai. Native ads have a design that you make. It fits into the overall design of your entire platform. Okay? It's value driven, like they offer some actual value to the customer and it's not like random stuff. Like, please don't be a site, like please don't be a travel site that, for example, puts up an ad for Netflix. It makes no sense. Like if you're a travel site, put up an ad to purchase, like, I don't know, backpacks maybe, you know, which makes sense. They might want a backpack, so that is what we should have. So it should be value driven, non-intrusive and contextual. So contextual मतलब जो भी आपका platform है उसके context में ads लेना. So you should control ads if you take it up. So one example I'll give you, this is one of my favorite creators of all time. So his name is Peter Levels. Okay, so he has this site called Nomad List. So it's basically a site that shows you different countries around the world and how suitable the country is for remote working. Okay? And he made this site way before remote working was famous, and now it's like really taking off like anything. It was already always famous, this site. So for example, if you take like Berlin, so it shows you things like in Berlin, sorry. So it shows you things like in Berlin, you know, like internet ka speed kitna hai, how fun is the place, how safe is it, and when you open inside, you'll see a lot of other things like what is the cost of living for a month, what is the cost of eating like a non-vegetarian or a vegetarian meal for a month, and all of that other stuff, right? So he has that information. Now the ads on this site, if you notice, is right here. ठीक है, पता भी नहीं चलेगा कि this is an ad, and it tells you global travel medical insurance for $1.34 a day, COVID-19 coverage included. So it actually shows you an ad that is relevant to what is on the site, something that people will actually want, something that has value, something that is related to the problem you're solving, related to the solution you're offering, and hence does not feel like an ad. It feels like an additional value that you're offering, but it is an ad. It's just a native ad, right? So just like you have native apps, you can also build native apps. Native ads. So yep, just wanted to give you guys that as well. And that's it. That's all I have for you today. You can take a screenshot of this. It's recorded, so of course you can refer to it later. And that's all. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohan, so much.
Thank you.
I have a
Thanks.
question. Send me to
Any
the
questions, guys?
Thank you for the session, Rohan. It was a lot of information.
I know it's a lot to process.
Yeah. Well, I'll watch the recording again, I guess. Maybe later.
Sure,
It was
no
a
problem.
hard part.
So take your time, everybody. So as Mansi, you're right. It's a lot of information to process. Take your time, take it slow. Watch the recording again. Also, the live human being is also going to be available for you on Friday, right? So you can reach out to me on Friday as well and ask for questions, right, Mansi? Or yeah. So if you have any questions, email, DM, whatever you prefer. And yeah, I hope this was useful. फीचर्स चाहिए, ठीक है, वो आइदर कुछ भी बोलेगा, ठीक है, नहीं तो कुछ भी नहीं बोलेगा, दोनों में से एक, ठीक है। अगर तुम ऐप दिखाए उसको, बोले कि अरे भाई बताओ ये क्या मस्त तुमको एआई लगाया इसमें, भाई एआई दिख रहा है क्या, कैसा है, प्लीज डोंट एक्सपेक्ट द ड्राइवर टू टेल यू कि हाँ भाई इसमें ना एक काम करो, ये मशीन लर्निंग लगा दो थोड़ा, इधर एक क्यूआर कोड स्कैनर लगाओ, ये सब नहीं बोल सकता है वो तुमको, ठीक है। वो बस तुमको ये नहीं पूछना है कभी भी कि ऐप कैसा लग रहा है, कभी मत पूछना ये चीज, या डिजाइन कैसा लग रहा है। लोग फालतू का चीज बोलेंगे, अरे ये वाला बटन थोड़ा यहाँ होता तो मस्त लगता, अरे ये वाला पेज का थोड़ा फॉन्ट ये करो, ये सब आंसर्स मिलते हैं हमेशा, ठीक है, जो एक निहायती बकवास आंसर्स है, कोई उसका मतलब पर्पस नहीं है लाइफ, ठीक है।
सर हाँ तो हाँ ठीक है।
So if you were to ask a driver, because you need to take the driver's opinion into consideration, right? तुमको सबसे पहले ड्राइवर को पूछना चाहिए कि एक बात बता, टेल मी तेरा अभी का प्रोसेस कैसे काम करता है। तो ड्राइवर बोलेगा कि मैं सामान उठाता हूँ, मैं नाम लिखता हूँ रजिस्टर में, अपना आईडी डालता हूँ, आईडी प्रूफ सबमिट करता हूँ इधर, फिर मैं टोल देता हूँ रास्ते पे, फिर पुलिस चेकिंग होता है, घूस देना पड़ता है, पैसा कैश में रखना पड़ता है, उसके बाद वहां पे जब मैं डिलीवर करता हूँ फिर से मेरा आईडी चेक होता है, देखता हूँ, साइन करता हूँ, कस्टमर का साइन लेता हूँ, आईडी कलेक्ट करता हूँ, होता है कंप्लीट। तो तुमको क्या पता चला, टोल देने के लिए उसको कैश निकालना पड़ता है, क्यूआर कोड या फास्ट टैग लगा दो, ठीक है। उसको अपना डिटेल्स देना पड़ता है, बायोमेट्रिक स्टोर करो सो दैट ही डजंट हैव टू कैरी हिज आईडी कार्ड एवरीवेयर, राइट? तुम ऐसे फीचर सोचते हो बाय अंडरस्टैंडिंग कि वो कर क्या रहा है लाइफ में, एंड देन यू मेक हिम यूज इट, एंड तुम बोलते हो कि तुम्हारा सारा प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व हो रहा है क्या इससे, ये पूछना है तुमको, नॉट कि फीचर्स बताइए ऐप का फील कैसा है, ये सब मत पूछ देना भाई।
नहीं नहीं, ऐसे ही नहीं था जैसे आप बता रहे हो ना, तो ऐसे नहीं पूछता कि आगे प्रॉब्लम्स क्या है। मतलब मैंने पूछा कि अभी ऐसे ऐसे क्या करते हो जैसे आप बता रहे थे, और क्या क्या दिक्कत आ रही है ये पूछा था, मतलब उस चीज में
ठीक,
ऐसे।
बात करते हैं
तो
इसके बारे में, मैंने तेरा
हाँ,
देखा रिस्पॉन्सेज, तो हम
ठीक है
डिटेल्स में बात करेंगे इसके बारे में, ठीक है? लाइक आई
ठीक
वांट
है
टू रिजर्व सम टाइम स्पेसिफिकली टू एड्रेस योर क्वेश्चन, इसलिए।
ठीक है। तो अभी के
चलेगा?
लिए करना है, बस ये बता दीजिए।
अभी के लिए क्या?
हाँ,
अभी के लिए क्या बताना है?
मतलब अभी के लिए क्या करूँ, तो जब तक मीटिंग ना हो तब तक क्या करें?
कुछ नहीं है काम तेरे पास क्या करने का? मैं क्या वाला टीचर हूँ क्या भाई? लाइक ये करो, होमवर्क है ये, 2 दिन तक सबमिट करो, फिर स्टार्टअप चलेगा। लाइक व्हाट इज दिस? Okay, if you want to know, what you should do is start seriously asking the question about how much will you price it at, what should your pricing model be, ठीक है? प्रीवियस वीक का अगर तुमने अभी तक आंसर्स नहीं दिया है तो उसका भी आंसर ढूंढना है तुमको। कस्टमर जर्नी क्या होगा फाइनल वाला, हर स्क्रीन में क्या होएगा, सेटअप कैसे करोगे, व्हाट आर द कंडीशंस इन विच योर प्रोडक्ट और सर्विस माइट फेल, कॉन्स्ट्रेंट्स क्या क्या है, कॉन्स्ट्रेंट्स को फिक्स कैसे करोगे, उसके बाद वो डिलीवरी चैनल, डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन चैनल का क्वेश्चंस आंसर करना, डिस्कवरी कैसे होगा, हाउ विल पीपल थिंक अबाउट यू, हाउ विल दे रीच आउट, हाउ विल दे फाइंड आउट अबाउट यू विदाउट मीटिंग यू आकाश, राइट? फिर डिलीवर कैसे होगा, परचेज सपोर्ट क्या क्या प्रोवाइड करोगे, कैसे प्रोवाइड करोगे, कितना खर्चा होएगा, किधर होएगा, फाइनेंसेस मॉडल बनाओ, प्रोजेक्शंस बनाओ, शीट में डालो सब कुछ, देखो तुम्हारा मार्जिन कितना आता है। बहुत काम है भाई आकाश, तुम तो मतलब।
या मतलब वर्कशॉप से रिलेटेड जो भी हुआ है वो करने को सिंपली।
हाँ मतलब, और अरे भाई तुम लाइफ में कुछ भी कर सकते हो, मतलब मैं पापा नहीं हूँ तुम्हारा, फादर्स डे में कार्ड मत भेज देना। मतलब करो तुमको जो भी करना है, बहुत काम है तुम्हारे पास, एंड वर्कशॉप रिलेटेड दीज आर द थिंग्स यू वर्क ऑन that will help you get more clarity on your startup. Like that's my hope, that if you answer them it will help you get more clarity. ठीक है?
ठीक है।
Sounds good. And of course you're doing your research, keep working on that, work on these models, and with you before Friday I'll talk in details.
यस सर, थैंक
ठीक है? मोस्ट प्रोबेबली कल या परसों, मैं देखता हूँ, बता दूँ तुमको, एक बार बस मेरे को एक ड्रॉप कर देना, ठीक है? मैसेज या ईमेल जो भी। ओके, थैंक्स। एनीबॉडी एल्स? हिमांशु क्या हाल है भाई?
बढ़िया एकदम।
बढ़िया, मजा आया, सीखने को
हाँ
मिला?
बहुत कुछ।
नाइस नाइस, गुड स्टफ। कोई सवाल किसी का बिफोर आई आंसर साकेत क्वेश्चन? शिवानी, ऑल ओके? सब ठीक?
Yes, it's fine.
Do you stay here voluntarily or does someone from the organizing team is like, Shivani you have to sit for 3 hours, बीच में छोड़ के चली गई तो
No,
कुछ होएगा, मतलब ऐसा
not
स्कैरी
like
सा?
that. Actually, I enjoy, like, it's something new to learn. That's why I stay.
Really?
Yeah, actually.
For 3 hours?
I usually attend events, so it's really good for me.
Is this like all the other events you attend, or do you find this different, or do you find it as useful?
It's useful.
I want the truth, I don't want flattery.
No, it's true. Actually, this is totally different from the events that I attend. Actually, I'm a student partner at Microsoft, so usually those events are like based on technical stuff. So something completely different, and that's something new to them.
नाइस नाइस। देखो पहला बात ये है ना कि मैं ना टीचर नहीं हूँ, मेरे को नहीं आता है पढ़ाना, ठीक है? आई एक्चुअली रन अ कंपनी, आई हैव टू डू ऑल दिस एवरी डे इन माय लाइफ, ऑलराइट? आई हैव टू बिल्ड प्रोडक्ट्स, मैनेज टीम्स, you know, sell stuff and growth scale. So I've been doing this in my life. I don't know how to teach, so that's why, like, I just kind of approach it from the perspective that if I had to attend a session, what kind of session would it be so that people have fun and learn something, which is light, there are stories, it's fun, I make jokes, I talk to people, you know, and then have practical stuff. So yeah, I'm not a teacher, please don't judge me as a teacher. There are professionals who take workshops, I'm not here, मेरे को नहीं आता पढ़ाना, मैं खुद वेबिनार नहीं अटेंड करता बचपन में, अभी मेरे को ये लेना पड़ता है, but I do it the way like I would if I was an entrepreneur when I was 19 years old and in college. What kind of a workshop would I want to attend? You know? That's how I approach this. Yeah. All right. कोई सवाल किसी का? Except Saket. Himanshu, कोई सवाल? All good. Okay. So, Saket, I'll tell you one story. I don't know if you know. Do you know about the drunk elephants in the
Actually,
Northeast?
I was
I have
going
read
to
it in
say.
your.
You've read it? What do you know, Shivani?
I was saying that last year actually came across your video that drunk elephant teachers.
Last year.
No, one means a few months back. I came across that video.
Okay.
It was
Nice,
like
nice.
so. There, I actually wanted to ask that there you mentioned that you had like you were shy and was social anxiety speaking up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how did you overcome that?
It's a long story for another time, but I actually overcame by doing uncomfortable things. So hard, yeah, कितना मुश्किल था. I had solid. I still have. I'm still an introvert, but लोगों को लगता नहीं है ये चीज, because of the kind of work I do. But yeah, like I've had stage fear. I've had social anxiety. I couldn't speak to people a lot. So it was difficult, but there are certain things that I did that really helped me that I'll be able to talk to you about. But let me answer Saket's question. On Friday, I'll answer your question, Shivani. Ask me this again, okay? Pakka, promise.
Sure.
Saket, to answer your question, so this drunk elephants thing, for those of you who don't know, okay? So क्या होता है? In the Northeast, like from where I am, there's a 100-kilometer stretch of land which is like a elephant corridor. So this starts from North Bengal, goes right up to like Assam. Okay? And that area has borders with like 3-4 countries: China, Bhutan, okay? China, Bhutan, Nepal, and Bangladesh. Okay? Elephant corridor क्यों बोलते हैं उसको? वहां पे ना elephant population बहुत high है. 2 places in India where it's very high. That region in the northeast, and in Kerala and in the south, like the Nilgiri areas, right? So दो regions में बहुत high elephant population. So true story, ठीक है? Elephants ना एक सेम रूट लेके ट्रैवल करते हैं हमेशा. दे डोंट चेंज देयर रूट्स. ठीक है? लाइक द पेरेंट्स टीच इट टू द बेबी एलिफेंट्स एंड देन दे बिकम पेरेंट्स, दे टीच इट टू देयर बेबीज वगैरह वगैरह. सो सेम रूट लेते हैं. ठीक है? एंड दीज रूट्स हैव बीन पास डाउन. सो ऑफ कोर्स दे चेंज द रूट समटाइम्स व्हेन देयर आर एक्सीडेंट्स एंड स्टफ. लेकिन एलिफेंट्स बहुत इंटेलिजेंट होते हैं बिकॉज उनका ब्रेन का साइज बहुत बड़ा है. बहुत इंटेलिजेंट, वेरी एम्पैथेटिक, वेरी जेंटल क्रीचर्स, वेरी वेरी जेंटल. लेकिन मैन एनिमल कॉन्फ्लिक्ट बहुत होता है. जैसे कि देयर इज अ नॉर्थ ईस्ट फ्रंटियर रेलवे. ठीक है? जैसे वेस्टर्न रेलवे है मुंबई में, नॉर्दर्न रेलवे, वेस्ट सदर्न रेलवे, ऐसा नॉर्थ ईस्ट फ्रंटियर रेलवे है दैट ट्रैवल्स अक्रॉस द नॉर्थ ईस्ट एंड द हिल्स एंड द माउंटेन्स वगैरह वगैरह. सो इट एक्चुअली कट्स थ्रू फॉरेस्ट. ठीक है? तो एलिफेंट्स लोग, बहुत सारे एलिफेंट एक्सीडेंट में मारे गए थे. व्हेन लाइक अ ट्रेन हिट्स एन एलिफेंट एंड दे डाई. बहुत होता है ऐसा, बहुत बहुत होता है. Over the years, the elephants have actually learned to adapt to this change in their environment. So अभी क्या करते हैं पता है elephants? Elephant का community पहला बात matriarchal होता है. मतलब the mother elephant is the leader of the family, not the father elephant. ठीक है? Like they are women dominated communities होते हैं उनका. अपना opposite. Like this shitty patriarchal society that we have in most places in India. So क्या होता है? एलिफेंट का हर्ड जब ट्रैवल करते हैं, जो लीडर होता है ना, वो लोग अपना पांव ट्रैक पे रखते हैं टू फील वाइब्रेशंस कि कोई ट्रेन आ रहा है कि नहीं. राइट? सो दे पुट देयर फीट ऑन द ट्रैक, दे फील वाइब्रेशंस. If they can't feel anything, then they cross, like with the whole herd of like 20, 25, 30 elephants. But if they feel vibrations, then they don't cross, because elephants, they like very soft, which is why when they walk you can't hear the sound of elephants walking usually, because their feet are very soft. तो उनको बहुत अच्छे से feel हो जाता है. So think about this: an elephant is looking for a train before it crosses a track. Like that's not normal behavior. It's something that elephants have learned over the time. So it's just insane. And plus the drunk elephant story is this: कि elephants को there's a look. Can you please stop recording, Sakit? Actually, don't stop.
Actually,
It's fine.
Shahan is